the heavy iron gate groaned, a discordant note of rusted metal protesting under the relentless, tiny force of small fists pounding against it in the profound silence of the pre-dawn hours. Bang, bang, bang. The metallic sound was startling, echoing sharply through the vast, isolated courtyard of the secluded estate, hidden deep on the outskirts of Naples. It was well past midnight, and a small, determined figure stood on the far side of the massive wrought iron barrier, barely visible in the cold, sickly glow cast by a solitary street lamp. Inside the sprawling, silent villa, Dante Costa snapped awake, instantly alert to the frantic chatter of his security system. A motion sensor had been triggered at the front gate. Though half asleep barely seconds ago, he was now instantly fully operational. Dante rolled swiftly off his king-sized bed, his bare feet meeting the plush rug, and grabbed the heavy custom handgun resting on his nightstand. Years of ruling as the most feared, meticulous mafia boss in the city had brutally conditioned him to expect trouble, often lethal trouble, at any given hour. With a deep, sharp frown creasing his ruggedly handsome features, he strode barefoot across the dark, polished marble floor toward a hidden wall panel that concealed several CCTV monitors. He jabbed the key corresponding to the front gate camera. The grainy, green-tinted night vision feed blinked violently to life, revealing an utterly unexpected sight. A child, alone, standing outside his heavily fortified gate. The boy couldn't have been a day older than 7 or 8. He looked impossibly tiny against the towering iron bars, his mop of dark, unkempt hair messy, and his small hands gripping the cold metal, shaking the gate with a surprising, almost desperate ferocity. Dante watched, motionless, as one of his perimeter guards approached the disturbance. Marco was a massive man in a standard black suit, practically double the width and 4 times the physical weight of the little intruder. The boy immediately launched into action, shouting something. No, he was screaming it, face contorted in distress, directly at the towering guard, but the CCTV system relayed no audio. Dante narrowed his sharp gray eyes. The child was clearly profoundly upset, yelling with all his tiny might, though Dante still couldn't decipher a single word. The guard, Marco, seemed to be attempting to dismiss the situation, a large, dismissive palm gesturing broadly, trying to shoo the child away. But the boy refused to budge. Instead, exhibiting staggering audacity, the kid shoved his arm through the bars and actually grabbed the guard's tailored jacket lapel from the inside of the gate. Dante's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise, an expression rarely seen. "Che diavolo," he murmured instinctively under his breath, the Italian slang for, "What the hell is this?" On the monitor, Marco was visibly flustered now. Dante recognized him as Marco, reliable, experienced, and usually unflappable. Marco tried prying the boy's tenacious fingers off his expensive suit, clearly unsure how rough he could dare to be with a child who was clinging like a desperate pit bull. The boy's legs were braced apart for leverage, his small face flushed bright red with either overwhelming anger or imminent tears, perhaps a terrifying combination of both. Dante's chest involuntarily tightened at the desperate sight. Something about the child's raw, unadulterated desperation was intensely unsettling, yet strangely, profoundly compelling. Dante's finger hovered momentarily over the intercom button. Protocol demanded immediate action. Scare off trespassers, even exceptionally persistent little ones. But this situation was miles away from ordinary. How had a young child managed to get out onto the dangerous streets of Naples at this ungodly hour, completely alone? And why on earth was he specifically at Dante Costa's heavily guarded, notoriously inaccessible estate gate in the dead of the deepest night? No child in his right mind would take such a risk unless it truly was a matter of life or death. He pressed the intercom button hard. "Basta. Marco, bring him to me." Dante's low voice crackled through the speaker mounted by the gate. The tone was perfectly calm but undeniably authoritative, the kind of voice that demanded and received immediate, unquestioning compliance. On the screen, Marco looked up in surprised question at the camera lens, then gave a curt, instant nod. He carefully, gingerly disengaged the boy's stubborn fingers from his jacket fabric. The child resisted fiercely at first, struggling with the fury of a wild cat. But as soon as Marco spoke, likely telling him that the boss himself had agreed to see him, the fight drained abruptly out of the small figure. The guard opened the massive gate just enough, creating a narrow gap to let the child squeeze through. Dante watched the boy march forward, chin jutted out stubbornly, projecting defiance even as he swayed perceptibly on his feet. The kid looked ready to collapse from sheer exhaustion. Dante could clearly see the distinct tremor in the small shoulders and the way the boy blinked hard, repeatedly, as if fighting back torrents of tears or overwhelming fatigue. Dante felt a deep, unexpected tug in his chest, a pang of concern that felt acutely personal, something he hadn't experienced in years. He straightened his posture and pulled a black t-shirt over his bare, heavily muscled torso, silently tucking the handgun securely into the back of his waistband. Within mere moments, the boy would be at his door. Dante paused, then quietly opened a locked drawer in a console by the wall and slipped out a sleek, razor-sharp dagger, expertly sheathing it at his ankle. Old habits died hard. Even if this specific child posed absolutely no direct threat, Dante hadn't survived this long by being foolishly careless. And if someone had sent a child as a cunning distraction or a deadly trap, they would regret the calculation instantly. Downstairs, he disarmed the villa's internal alarm system and opened the heavy, intricately carved oak door just as Marco led the boy up the front steps of the opulent villa. The guard had a massive, meaty hand resting gently on the child's small shoulder, clearly more to provide weary support than actual restraint at this point. As soon as the door swung fully open, Dante saw the boy clearly for the very first time, stripped of the greenish distortion of night vision. The child was indeed startlingly small, perhaps exactly 7 years old, with a pale face, smudged thoroughly with dirt, and large, dark eyes that were filled with equal measures of desperate fear and fierce determination. His cheeks glistened where a few tears had escaped the dam, carving clean paths through the grime. He wore a thin, threadbare hoodie despite the palpable chill of the winter night and clutched something tightly in his tiny fist. It looked like a crumpled, dirty piece of paper. Those wide, dark eyes locked instantly onto Dante. For a second, Dante wondered intensely what the boy saw. He knew his own appearance was inherently intimidating to almost everyone. Tall and powerfully broad-shouldered, his arms marked with tattoos that subtly hinted at a life built on violence, and sharp gray eyes that seldom if ever showed true mercy. Dante fully expected the child to shrink back immediately, perhaps to reconsider whatever insane mission had driven him here. Instead, the boy took a courageous step forward, moving out of Marco's supportive hold. His lower lip trembled uncontrollably, but he lifted his chin with a kind of defiant, breathtaking courage. "Sir," the child said, his voice shaky but surprisingly loud. "Please, I need your help." The words tumbled out, accented heavily with the local, thick Neapolitan dialect. "My mom disappeared after her blind date." Dante's breath caught sharply in his throat. Of all the possible scenarios he had rapidly anticipated, a lost child, an extortion attempt, some bizarre prank, this agonizing plea was not one of them. The boy's voice cracked painfully on the last word, and Dante noticed how the kid clenched his fists tighter to stop them from shaking. "Come inside," Dante said quietly, stepping aside to usher the small boy in. He shot a quick, charged glance at Marco, silently signaling the guard to stand down but remain instantly alert. The guard nodded, understanding immediately that the boss desired privacy, but might call if the unusual situation escalated. The boy hesitated on the marble threshold, suddenly deeply wary now that he was face to face with the notorious mafia boss in the dimly lit foyer. Dante could see him struggling internally with the strong instinct to turn and run versus the desperate, overriding need that had compelled him to this place. "It's okay," Dante said, consciously softening his voice. He crouched down slowly, deliberately, making absolutely sure to maintain some distance so as not to instantly spook the kid. At this lower level, the boy's ragged breathing and profound trembling became even more heartbreakingly apparent. Dark circles stained the skin beneath those young eyes. The kid looked utterly, completely exhausted. You said your mother disappeared, Dante prompted gently. What is your name, ragazzo? The child swallowed hard, his throat working. It's Nico, he managed. Up close, Dante could see Nico's eyes were a deep, rich brown, round and glistening with tears that hadn't yet been allowed to fall. My name is Nico Biensi. Dante nodded encouragingly. Okay, Nico. I'm Dante. He purposely omitted his infamous last name, Costa. Everyone in Naples knew it, and it usually instilled pure, immediate terror. Right now, the boy needed urgent reassurance, not more fear. Tell me what happened to your mother. Nico bit his lip hard. He slowly opened his hand, revealing that the crumpled piece of paper Dante had glimpsed earlier was actually a small, creased and smudged photograph. The boy held it out with trembling fingers. Dante took it gingerly, carefully turning it under the hallway light. It showed a beautiful, smiling young woman with kind eyes and dark hair, her arm wrapped lovingly around a grinning Nico, who looked a couple of years younger in the picture. The mother's face was undeniably striking. Dante felt a strange, momentary jolt of recognition, but he couldn't immediately place exactly why. She's my mama, Nico said in a small, reverent voice, fear and desperation mingling. Her name is Sophia. She went on a blind date 2 days ago, and she never came home. His voice finally faltered at the very end, and Dante could see him fighting with every muscle not to burst into tears. Dante's jaw tightened severely. 2 days missing. A beautiful young woman vanishing immediately after a date. In his line of work, he could instantly conjure a dozen horrific possibilities, ranging from human trafficking rings to a serial predator targeting single women. The thought made his blood run absolutely cold, but he forced his expression to remain utterly steady for the boy's sake. Have you told the police? Dante asked. His voice remained unervingly calm and even, though inside, his mind was already racing furiously through the implications. Nico nodded, a flash of pure, raw frustration crossing his grimy face. I tried. I went yesterday, but they didn't really listen. His small hands balled instantly into fists again, knuckles white. They said maybe she just ran off with the guy or that maybe she needed a break and would come back. His voice turned sharp and bitter as he recounted the authorities' dismissive attitude. They didn't believe me. I know my mama. She would never leave me. Something bad happened. I know it. A single, hot tear finally escaped and rolled down Nico's cheek, but he angrily wiped it away with the back of his hand. Dante felt a powerful surge of protective anger on the boy's behalf. It was exactly like the corrupt local authorities to ignore a desperate child, especially if the missing person was a single mother. Dante knew the police would immediately assume she might have left on her own, classifying her as just another adult casualty in a city full of daily dramas. They certainly wouldn't mobilize quickly for a missing woman, not unless there was concrete evidence of foul play, which currently they lacked. I believe you, Dante said firmly. The wave of overwhelming relief that washed over Nico's eyes was immediate and profound, though his tears still glistened in the low light. Dante placed a careful, substantial hand on the boy's trembling shoulder. He felt the small body shaking beneath his palm and realized with a painful start how bony Nico felt even through the thin fabric of the hoodie. When was the last time you ate something? Nico opened his mouth as if to answer, but nothing emerged. He frowned deeply, clearly struggling to remember. I'm not sure. Maybe yesterday morning or the day before. A spike of serious concern shot through Dante. The kid hadn't eaten in possibly 48 hours. Dante stood up at once, gently guiding the boy further into the immense house. You need food, he stated, leaving absolutely no room for argument. We'll talk in the kitchen. Nico didn't protest. His eyes widened slightly as he took in the sheer grandeur of the villa's foyer, the polished marble floors, the impossibly high ceilings, a sweeping grand staircase curving dramatically up to the second floor. Under different, less terrifying circumstances, any child might be delighted to wander such a place. But right now, Nico was running solely on adrenaline, fumes, and worry. His steps were terribly unsteady, and Dante realized the boy was literally starving and completely exhausted. Dante led Nico into the massive, gleaming kitchen. The house was mostly dark and silent at this late hour, but he flicked on the warm recessed lights of the kitchen, which revealed its modern, immaculate surfaces. Nico hovered uncertainly by the doorway, clearly unsure if he was even allowed inside such a pristine space. "Sit," Dante said, pointing to one of the tall stools at the expansive kitchen island. Nico obeyed, managing to climb up onto the stool. He swayed slightly once perched, as though the simple effort of climbing had taken far more out of him than it should have. Dante quickly opened the professional-grade fridge. As a man living alone, he typically had a chef come during the daytime or ate out, but he always kept some basic necessities stocked. He grabbed a bottle of fresh water and a plate of leftover pasta from dinner. After a moment's further thought, he also fetched some simple bread and cheese. He knew he shouldn't give a truly starving child heavy food too fast. It was better to start with something light and easily digestible. He placed the water bottle firmly in front of Nico. "Drink slowly," he instructed. Nico's grubby hands fumbled hopelessly with the tight plastic cap. Dante reached over without hesitation and twisted it open for him. The boy murmured a husky grazie and gulped greedily, then quickly remembered Dante's instruction and forced himself to slow down, taking measured sips. Dante quietly heated the leftover pasta in a pan on the stove. The only sounds were the faint, gentle sizzle from the stove top and the soft ticking of a clock mounted high on the wall. He could sense Nico's wide eyes following his every deliberate move, still filled with weariness but now powerfully hopeful. In those few minutes, Dante's highly analytical mind churned incessantly. He recalled the photograph. Sophia. He rolled the name silently on his tongue. The face had definitely stirred something within him. Had he seen her before, perhaps frequently around the neighborhood where he kept a low profile? She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, with those gentle, earnest eyes. He felt a deep, unfamiliar protective instinct rising, identical to the way he felt whenever he saw innocent people in serious trouble on his turf. Dante might be a feared criminal in the eyes of state society, but he possessed his own strict, unforgiving code. He absolutely hated those who preyed on the weak, especially women and children. If someone had taken this woman, Dante vowed, he would personally move heaven and earth to bring her back and make the perpetrator pay dearly, in blood and coin. He slid the warm plate of pasta in front of Nico and offered him a thick slice of rustic bread. "Eat," he simply said. Nico didn't need to be told a second time. He dug in with a ravenous, desperate energy, trying weakly to be polite, but failing as he slurped the spaghetti with shaky, uncontrolled hands. Dante almost allowed himself a smile but held it back, not wanting to cause the kid any further embarrassment. Instead, he gently prompted, "Feeling better?" Nico nodded rapidly, swallowing a large mouthful. "Yes, sir. Thank you." He deliberately slowed down a little, as if suddenly aware of his manners. "I'm sorry. I was so hungry." "It's all right," Dante said quietly. "Just eat. There's plenty more if you want." They stayed silent for a while as Nico ate steadily. Color gradually began to return to the boy's pale cheeks. Dante leaned back against the counter, arms crossed loosely, watching with a deep, thoughtful expression. He was still intently trying to puzzle out that sharp sense of familiarity linked to Sophia's face. As Nico ate, Dante decided to ask more detailed questions gently. "You said your mother went on a blind date." Dante began, his voice soft. "Did she tell you anything at all about the man, or exactly where they were going?" Nico nodded, wiping his mouth quickly on the back of his sleeve. "She said it was a restaurant in the city center. Del Mar. And the man's name was Paolo, I think. It was supposed to be just dinner. She said she'd be back by my bedtime." His voice trembled again at that detail, the hurt of being abandoned for 2 days seeping into his words. "But she didn't come back. And I waited all night. I tried calling her phone, but she didn't answer." Dante's eyes darkened ominously. He knew that restaurant, a cozy, popular local spot. If someone had snatched her from there, someone must have seen or heard something. Unless the man had expertly lured her out with some smooth excuse. When she didn't come back that night, "What did you do, Nico?" Dante asked softly. I was scared," Nico admitted, looking down at his plate, shamefaced. "I thought maybe she got stuck somewhere or her phone died, but the whole next day she still didn't come home. I kept hoping she'd just walk through the door. I was afraid to leave the apartment in case she came home and I wasn't there. I didn't know what to do." His voice fell to a broken whisper on the last sentence. Dante could hear the sheer loneliness and paralyzing fear that must have consumed those agonizing hours for the child. Nico sniffed hard and continued. "By the next evening, I was really worried. I remembered where she said she was going, so I went to the restaurant myself. The owner knows my mom. She sometimes works there part-time in the kitchen when she's not teaching. He said Mama had been there that night for her date, but she left with the man around 9 o'clock. The owner thought she left willingly, like it was fine, but she never came home." Nico's hand gripped the fork so tightly Dante thought the fragile plastic might snap. "I asked if anyone saw which way they went, but no one really noticed. One waiter said the man seemed upset when they left, like he was talking angrily, but they didn't think it was anything bad at the time." Dante's frown deepened further. A public restaurant was a relatively safe environment. Likely nothing terrible happened there. But if the man was already angry and she left with him, either he convinced her to go somewhere else and then immediately turned on her, or he forcibly coerced her out once they were away from witnesses. "You did good investigating," Dante genuinely assured the boy. It was impressive that Nico had possessed the courage to go around asking intimidating adults for information entirely on his own. "What did you do then?" Nico sighed heavily, stirring the remaining pasta absently. "I went to the police after that. I was so afraid, and I didn't know who else to ask. But like I said, they didn't help. They took a report, but I could tell they didn't believe me." His small face twisted in anger and disgust. "One officer even said maybe Mama found a new boyfriend and forgot to tell me. My Mama would never do that. We only have each other. She wouldn't just leave me." A fierce, protective loyalty welled up violently in Dante. He believed the boy completely. He'd seen that kind of singular devotion on a mother's face before. Hell, he'd seen it on Sophia's face in that very photo as she held her son. That was not the face of a woman who had abandoned her child. "I'm sure she wouldn't," Dante said, his voice coming out more tenderly than he intended. He quickly cleared his throat and added, "The police are often useless in these situations. They have to wait 48 hours for a missing person to be considered in trouble. By then, it can be too late." He didn't sugarcoat the ugly truth. Kids often appreciate raw honesty, and he already sensed Nico was an inherently tough kid. Nico looked up at Dante with a steady, unwavering gaze. "That's why I came here," he said quietly. Dante raised one eyebrow. "Why me, Nico? Do you know who I am?" The boy nodded slowly. "Mama always said," she said, "Senior Dante runs the city. That nothing happens in Naples without you knowing." Nico looked down, a little embarrassed by the admission. "And I remember you from that day at the market." Dante's heart gave a strange, powerful lurch. The market? Yes. He had seen her before. The memory flooded vividly back, just a few months ago. He had been walking casually through an open-air market on Via Roma, keeping a deceptively low profile, just enjoying a brief stroll among normal people, when he'd been forced to intervene in a quick scuffle. Some low-life peddler had been viciously harassing a young woman who refused to buy something. The scumbag had gotten physical, aggressively grabbing her wrist, quickly making a nasty scene. Dante had stepped in instantly, teaching the scum a sharp, unforgettable lesson with a few choice, quiet words and a very painful, twisted arm. He remembered now that the specific woman he saved was not Sophia, but right after the incident, he'd noticed another woman nearby with a child. She was intently comforting her own frightened child, who'd been startled badly by the commotion. Dante had looked over and locked eyes with that mother for just a moment. Her face had struck him even then, beautiful and deeply grateful as she mouthed a silent thank you to him from a distance. mistakenly thinking he'd simply done a random good deed. Dante had returned a polite, curt nod and moved on, but he hadn't forgotten her image. Could it be? Dante's pulse ticked up sharply. The mother with the child at the market. Was that Sophia and Nico? It had to have been. No wonder her face in the photo had stirred his powerful memory. He had seen her that day, and perhaps once or twice around town afterward, though always from a considerable distance. He had found himself occasionally checking the small marketplace on Via Roma after that, hoping for another fleeting glimpse, though he never once approached her. At the time, he chided himself internally for being foolish. What was he going to do? Introduce himself as the city's most powerful mafia boss to a gentle schoolteacher or market vendor? No, he had fiercely kept his distance, simply making absolutely sure that any time he was in that particular neighborhood, his men kept an extra vigilant eye out so that no thugs or troublemakers ever bothered the decent vendors or shoppers again. Perhaps subconsciously it had been for her, for Sophia. Nico continued talking, pulling Dante sharply from his quiet reverie. You stopped those men from hurting that lady at the market. I saw you make them go away and leave everyone alone. And then I heard some people say afterward that you were the one who keeps the peace in our neighborhood. Mama told me not to talk about it, but I know you're kind of like a king here. A king who can make bad people pay. The boy's voice carried an unblinking sincerity, delivered with an almost earnest reverence. Dante felt a slow, reluctant smile tug at the corners of his mouth. A king, huh? He had been branded with countless titles over the years. Capo, boss, criminal, predator, Illinois Diavolo, the devil. But hearing that word from the lips of this small, innocent boy was unexpectedly touching, resonating with a deep, forgotten part of himself. He lowered himself gracefully, kneeling so that his eyes were level with Nico's, who remained stiffly perched on the high stool. You think I can help you? Dante said, the words heavy not as a question, but as a dawning, terrible realization of the weight placed upon him. Nico nodded, the last vestiges of his brave facade crumbling as a tear finally spilled down his cheek. I didn't know who else to go to. Everyone else, they don't care. But you! His voice wobbled, cracking under the strain. You help people in our neighborhood, even if they don't know it's you. Mama said we shouldn't ever bother you, but she's never been gone this long. I'm so scared something happened. She's all I have. Please, Signore Dante. You're my only hope. Dante closed his eyes for a long moment, the image of his own history threatening to breach the surface. The last time someone had looked at him with such absolute trust and desperate pleading, it had been his own son begging him to come play, or his wife needing him home safe. Memories he'd buried beneath years of ice and steel threatened to surface and shatter him. But he forcefully steeled his resolve. This moment was not about his past ghosts. This was about the fragile child standing before him right now who desperately needed a savior. He opened his eyes, placing a large, warm hand on Nico's shoulder, this time entirely gentle. You did the right thing coming here, Nico. There was a profound, unshakable resolve in Dante's deep voice that caused Nico's eyes to light up with a sharp, fragile flicker of hope. I will find your mother, Nico. I promise you. Nico's breath hitched, a tiny, ragged sound. His tough little facade cracked completely, revealing the raw, terror-stricken child beneath. The boy launched himself forward, tumbling off the stool and crashing into Dante's chest, wrapping his arms around Dante's neck in a fierce, desperate hug that threatened to choke him. Dante froze for a shocked half-second, an onslaught of unfamiliar, powerful emotions rooting him to the spot. Slowly, hesitantly, he brought his arms around the trembling child, grounding him. It's okay, Dante murmured awkwardly, feeling the heat of Nico's tears immediately soak through the fine linen of his thin t-shirt. The boy was quietly sobbing now, the crushing exhaustion and sheer fear of the last 2 days finally finding a safe outlet. Dante gently rubbed Nico's back, trying to recall the exact, practiced cadence he used to use to comfort his own son after a bad nightmare. I'll take care of it. You're not alone anymore. Nico clung tighter still, tiny fists gripping the back of Dante's shirt as if terrified the man might vanish just as his mother had. "Thank you," the boy choked out between sobs. "Thank you." In that singular moment, Dante Costa, one of the most feared and ruthless men in all of Italy, felt something unexpected break open in the cage around his heart. He had meticulously locked away his softer feelings following his family's tragedy 5 years prior, encasing his soul in a shell of ice and cold ruthlessness. But this fragile child's complete trust and palpable heartbreak were cutting through those hardened defenses with alarming ease. Holding Nico close, Dante silently swore to himself that he would return Sofia to this boy, safe and sound. No matter what blood had to be spilled or what lines had to be crossed, whoever had dared harm Nico's mother would swiftly learn the true, brutal meaning of crossing a man like Dante. After what felt like an eternity, Nico's sobs subsided, leaving him shaky and drained. The boy pulled back, suddenly and deeply self-conscious about the emotional outburst. He scrubbed furiously at his face with the heel of his hand. "Sorry," he mumbled, his cheeks still flushed crimson with embarrassment. "There's nothing to apologize for," Dante said, his voice unusually gentle. He rose, lifting Nico effortlessly into his arms without a conscious thought. The boy felt unsettlingly light, almost featherweight, too light for a child his age. The lightness ignited a fresh wave of rage in Dante, a desire to track down Nico's rumored deadbeat father and make him pay for abandoning them. But that was a task for another time. Nico stiffened in surprise when Dante lifted him, but then quickly settled into his arms, clearly too drained to object. Dante carried him through the silent, expansive hallway. "Let's get you cleaned up and rested. Tomorrow we start looking for your mama." Nico's head drooped heavily against Dante's broad shoulder. The adrenaline that had fueled him for the past 48 hours finally wore off, now that he felt truly safe. "Okay," he murmured, already halfway to sleep. Dante carried him to a rarely used, comfortable guest bedroom on the ground floor. It was a simple, elegantly appointed room, furnished with understated wealth. He flicked on a bedside lamp. The soft light illuminated a neatly made bed. With one hand, Dante pulled back the heavy covers and gently set Nico down. The boy immediately curled up on his side, his eyes barely open. Dante knelt and took off the boy's worn-out sneakers. One gray sock had a distinct hole at the toe, where the fabric had completely given way. The sight tugged mercilessly at Dante's heart again, making him wonder just how desperately Sofia had been struggling, raising her son alone on a teacher's meager salary. As Dante drew the blanket up over Nico's small form, the boy's eyes fluttered open. "You won't leave me, will you?" Nico whispered, his small, weak hand reaching out instinctively to grasp Dante's thick forearm. Dante sank to sit on the edge of the mattress. He met Nico's gaze directly, his own eyes holding an immutable promise. "I'm right here. No one is going to hurt you. You can sleep, Nico." Nico's fingers relaxed slightly, still resting trustingly on Dante's arm. Will you really find her?" he asked, his voice tiny and already slurring with the onset of deep sleep. "I will," Dante promised again, his tone gravely serious. "I never break my promises." Nico managed a tiny nod of acceptance. Satisfied with that answer, his eyes finally closed, exhaustion overtaking him completely. Within moments, the boy was deeply asleep, his small hand still loosely holding on to Dante's arm. Dante sat there for a long while, listening to the child's breathing even out, though now and then a small hiccup from the residual crying would shudder through his tiny body. He waited until Nico's hand slipped off and the boy rolled onto his stomach, finding comfort hugging the pillow instead. Quietly, Dante stood and watched the sleeping child. He ran a hand roughly through his own dark hair, exhaling a long, slow breath. A storm of churning emotions brewed inside him. Pure, violent anger at whoever had caused this. Deep concern for the woman he barely knew yet felt mysteriously drawn to, and an undeniable, powerful warmth for the brave, desperate little boy who had marched into a known mafia boss's home in the dead of night to save his mother. Under any other circumstance, Dante might have allowed himself a faint, cynical smile at the sheer absurdity of the scenario. But there was nothing remotely amusing about a missing mother. Dante turned off the lamp, leaving the door slightly ajar so Nico wouldn't wake in total darkness. As he stepped out into the hallway, Dante immediately caught sight of Marco, his head guard, hovering discreetly at a distance, watching for any signal from his boss. Dante walked over and spoke in a low, measured voice so as not to disturb the sleeping boy. "Marco, I want 2 men stationed on this wing through the night," Dante ordered, his tone quiet but firm. "The kid is sleeping in the guest room here. I don't want any disturbances, and I want him safe at all costs." "Understood." "Yes, boss," Marco replied quietly, his eyes flickering toward the slightly open door. A fleeting hint of confusion crossed his face. No doubt he was curious why a child was suddenly taking residence, but he was wise enough not to ask questions. "I'll explain later. For now, just ensure he's protected." Dante's tone made it crystal clear that there would be hell to pay if anything, absolutely anything, happened to Nico under their watch. Marco nodded firmly and moved off immediately to arrange the guard rotation. With that settled, Dante made his way down the hall to his private study. He shut the heavy oak door behind him and immediately pulled out his cell phone. It was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning, but he had zero qualms about waking his captains at this hour. First, he dialed Lorenzo, one of his most trusted capitani, a man who oversaw many of Dante's operations around the city's heart. The phone barely rang once before a groggy voice answered. "Boss." "Lorenzo, listen up," Dante said, wasting no time on pleasantries. "I need you to gather a few of our most discreet guys first thing in the morning. We have a situation. A woman's gone missing, abducted possibly 2 nights ago after leaving the Trattoria del Sol. Her name is Sofia Biencha. Find out everything you can. Who she was with, where they went. I want information by tomorrow afternoon at the absolute latest." Lorenzo was clearly awake now. Dante could practically hear him sitting bolt upright and grabbing a notepad. "Understood, boss. Sofia Biencha, missing from the Trattoria del Sol 2 nights ago. Any description of the man she was with? First name Paolo. That's all I have so far. But check if the restaurant has any security cameras that face the parking lot, or if she parked her car there, and see if anyone noted a license plate. Also ask around discreetly. If someone took her, they might try to move her out of the city quickly. Check the usual pipelines, traffickers, known creeps, any whispers of a woman grabbed recently." Lorenzo cursed under his breath. He, like Dante, had a near-zero tolerance for crimes against women or children. "We'll find them, boss. I'll update you as soon as I have something concrete." "Make it fast, Lorenzo." Dante paused, then added in a deadly, velvet-soft voice that sent a chill down the phone line. "If you catch wind of someone connected to this, tell our boys to keep them breathing. I want the pleasure of tearing them apart personally." There was a brief, heavy silence on the line. "Capisco," Lorenzo acknowledged, using the formal term. He understood well the level of cold wrath Dante was hinting at. "I'll be in touch soon." Dante hung up. He pinched the bridge of his nose, physically forcing himself to think logically through the white-hot surge of rage. Snapping and wanting blood was his knee-jerk reaction whenever innocents were harmed on his turf. But he needed clarity now more than fury. He sank into the rich leather chair at his desk. The study was dim, the only light coming from the small desk lamp he switched on, illuminating a single framed photograph that stood there. Dante's chest tightened painfully as his eyes fell upon it. The frame held a picture of a bright-eyed little boy with a gap-toothed grin sitting high on the shoulders of a laughing woman with sunlit golden hair. Dante in the photo was off to the side, his arm wrapped securely around his wife's waist as they posed as a blindingly happy family on a crowded beach. Gently, Dante picked up the frame. His wife, Elena, and his son, Marco. It had been 5 years since the horrific car bomb that had stolen them away. 5 years since Dante had allowed himself to feel anything but calculating vengeance and cold duty. After they were gone, he had channeled all his pain into expanding his empire, crushing his enemies with brutal efficiency, and ensuring no one would ever catch him off guard or take what mattered to him again. He set the frame face down on the desk, unable to look into those joyful, lost faces any longer. Yet tonight, a small boy's desperate hug had stirred emotions in Dante that he thought he had successfully buried forever. In Nico's pleading eyes, he had seen a reflection of his own son, innocence threatened by cruelty, and a hope that Dante could somehow save the day. The weight of that trust was immense, but strangely, it gave Dante a renewed sense of purpose far beyond his own personal grievances. He spent the next hour making more calls. He pulled every string he could. A few contacts in the local police to at least get an official alert out on Sofia Biencha, and several street informants to start sniffing around for any unusual chatter in the city's dark corners. The underworld of Naples was a complex, treacherous web, but Dante had connections everywhere. If someone moved a kidnapped woman through his city, he would hear about it one way or another. By 3:30 a.m., there was nothing more he could do until his people reported back. Dante left the study and quietly checked on Nico one last time. The boy was fast asleep, breathing evenly. Dante noticed he was still clutching that photograph of his mother in one hand, even in sleep. Dante gently eased the picture from Nico's fingers to prevent it from getting crumpled further and placed it carefully on the nightstand. Then, Dante settled into a large armchair in the corner of the guest room. He tried to rest, but found himself unable to fully surrender to sleep. Instead, he kept a silent, watchful vigil over the child, the promise he'd made echoing in his head like a vow etched in stone. He would find Sofia, and God help the man who dared to take her. Early morning light, muted by the heavy curtains, filtered into the room when Dante heard a soft shuffling sound behind him. He had finally dozed off at some point in the armchair, one hand still resting on the arm of the chair near the bed. Now he rubbed his eyes and saw Nico sitting bolt upright in bed, blinking sleepily and looking profoundly confused as if unsure of where he was. Then, the terrible memory flooded the boy's face. His eyes went wide with pure panic. "Mama!" Nico gasped, throwing the covers off and scrambling out of bed, intending to bolt. Dante quickly stood, moving swiftly to catch the boy by the shoulders before Nico could flee. "Easy, easy," he said gently, his voice low and steadying. "You're safe here, Nico. Remember? You came to me last night." Nico stilled, recognition slowly calming him. His gaze darted around the unfamiliar room, then back to Dante. The morning sun lit up Dante's imposing face, and something about the man's strong, silent presence seemed to anchor the boy. Nico's voice was small and fearful. "I thought it was a nightmare that she was gone." He looked down, shoulders slumping heavily as he realized it wasn't a bad dream. His mother truly was missing. Dante knelt so he was eye level with Nico. "I meant what I said last night. I have my best people looking for her right now. We will find her." Nico searched Dante's face, looking for any hint of doubt or lie, but Dante's expression was firm and unwavering. After a moment, Nico nodded slowly. "Thank you," he whispered, remembering how he had broken down and how Dante had comforted him. He wiped at his eyes, then glanced toward the half-open door behind Dante. I should go home. Maybe Mama came back." "No," Dante interrupted softly but firmly. "Not until we know she's safe. You're staying with me where I can keep you safe too." Dante realized he hadn't fully articulated this necessity yet. If someone had taken Sofia, could the same person threaten Nico? It was unlikely the kidnapper cared about the boy or even knew of him, but Dante wasn't about to take any chances with a child under his protection. Nico hesitated. "But what if Mama comes home and I'm not there?" Dante had anticipated the boy's worry. "I've already thought of that. I'll have one of my men go watch your apartment. If your mother shows up, or if anyone comes looking for her, we'll know immediately. I don't want you going back there alone right now." Nico bit his lip, then finally relented. Maybe part of him didn't want to return to an empty, terrifying apartment anyway. "Okay, good. Now, how about we get you cleaned up and find you some breakfast?" Dante said, trying to sound upbeat for the boy's sake. Only now, in the clear daylight, did Dante notice Nico's appearance fully. The kid's clothes were even dirtier and more rumpled than they had seemed last night, and there was a fading scrape and bruise on his left knee, likely from stumbling during his long walk through the city. Dante felt another wave of protective anger at the situation. This child had practically been through a private hell the past 2 days. Nico followed Dante through the hallway, glancing around wide-eyed at the luxurious decor he hadn't fully noticed in the dark. The villa's interior was elegant, not gaudy. Tasteful abstract art on the walls, expensive, thick rugs on the polished floors. Everything was impeccably clean. Probably felt like a palace compared to Nico's modest apartment. Dante led him to a large, opulent bathroom. There's a shower if you want to freshen up, or I can run a bath if you prefer. Nico shook his head quickly, eyes widening at the idea of using such a grand bathroom. I'm okay, sir. I can just wash my face, maybe. Dante gave a gentle, understanding smile. All right, face washing is fine. There's a new toothbrush in the cabinet, too. While Nico awkwardly stood on tiptoes to splash water on his face, Dante stepped out and made a quick call to one of Marco's men, instructing him to station near Sophia's apartment discreetly and to alert him instantly if she or anyone suspicious came by. The chances were slim, but Dante wanted every base covered. He then fetched some clothes for Nico. Dante didn't exactly have children's clothing lying around, but he found a small t-shirt and a pair of drawstring sweatpants that belonged to his late son, Marco. Dante hesitated when he pulled them from a labeled storage box in his bedroom closet. The shirt was a faded blue with a cartoon astronaut on it, and the pants were soft gray cotton, one knee patched expertly where his son had torn it playing outside. Dante's chest constricted painfully at the sight of the little clothes. The memories threatened to surge again, overwhelming him, but he steadied himself. This was not the time to crumble. Returning to the bathroom, he found Nico drying his face on a fluffy white towel. The boy's hair was damp where he had run wet fingers through it. Dante held out the clothes. These might fit you better than what you have on. They were my son's. His voice grew quieter and rougher at the last part. Nico looked at the offering, then up at Dante, understanding the profound significance of the gesture. Your son? He echoed softly. Dante nodded, keeping his expression carefully neutral. He's not here anymore, but I think he'd like it if someone could use his things. There was a long pause. Nico accepted the clothes gingerly, treating them with immediate respect. Thank you. I'll take good care of them. Dante managed a tight, slight smile and stepped out to give Nico privacy to change. As he leaned against the wall in the hallway, he closed his eyes briefly. The memories he typically kept locked away tried to push through. Memories of a lively 6-year-old, racing through these very halls, of laughter and the sound of little feet pattering on these marble floors. Dante took a slow, deep breath. Focus. He needed to stay relentlessly focused on the present task. When Nico emerged, the clothes were a bit loose, but not excessively so. The boy had rolled up the pant legs a little to keep from tripping. He offered a tentative, small smile. They fit okay. They look good. Dante nodded. Seeing Nico in his son's faded t-shirt hit him with an unexpected pang of nostalgia. But it also felt right in a strange way, as if some part of his son's memory lived on by protecting this child. In the vast kitchen, Dante set about making breakfast. Usually, his morning routine was a quick, bitter espresso and maybe a cornetto pastry dropped off by his housekeeper. But today he decided to prepare something himself. He found fresh eggs and started making a simple omelet. Nico hovered nearby, clearly feeling out of place in the grand, professional kitchen. You can sit, Dante said, motioning to the same high stool as last night. Nico hopped up, watching with intense curiosity as Dante worked. You're cooking, but you're a mafia boss. Dante finished deftly cracking an egg one-handed into a bowl. Even mafia bosses can cook a little, Nico. I'm not completely helpless. Nico blushed slightly. I didn't expect someone like you to take care of me. Dante paused mid-whisk and turned to face the boy. Someone like me? Nico fidgeted with his hands. Mama said you're an important man, that we shouldn't bother you because you have important things to do. And I've heard people say you're dangerous. Dante resumed whisking the eggs, his movements precise, thinking hard about how to respond honestly yet appropriately to a child. He opted for stark truth. I am dangerous, Nico, to people who deserve it. I do bad things sometimes, yes, but I never hurt good people. I protect this neighborhood, this city, in my own way. Sometimes the law isn't enough, so someone like me has to step in. Nico absorbed that quietly, his brow furrowed in concentration. So, you're a good guy who does bad things to bad people? The simple yet astute observation made Dante let out a short, genuine chuckle. Something like that. He poured the beaten eggs into a hot pan. The omelette sizzled loudly as he added cheese and herbs. Your mama? She's a teacher? He asked over his shoulder, recalling Nico mentioning that. Yeah, Nico said, brightening just a little at the chance to talk about her. She teaches literature at the local primary school, and sometimes she works at the restaurant on weekends to earn extra money. She likes books a lot. She reads to me every single night. Well, she used to. His voice faltered again, thinking of the lost routine. What's your favorite story she reads to you? Dante asked gently, flipping the omelette perfectly onto a plate. Nico thought for a moment, his gaze distant. Pinocchio, he said. Mama does funny voices for all the characters. She always says Papa was like Pinocchio because he told lies, but Pinocchio never learned to be good like the real one did. That fate, the one who never redeemed himself, was the version that stayed with Nico. He knew it mirrored a certain sadness in his mother, a silent disappointment she carried. I think that story makes Mama a little sad, he confessed softly, but she still reads it to me because I love all the adventures, even the dark parts. Dante placed the plate, a fluffy, golden omelette alongside generous slices of buttered toast, in front of the boy. He had certainly caught the flash of raw bitterness that crossed Nico's face the moment he mentioned his father. Keeping his voice low and devoid of judgment, Dante asked, You mentioned last night that your father left you both, didn't you? The boy nodded slowly, poking the edge of the eggs with his fork as if hesitant to start eating. He left when I was 4, Nico confirmed, his voice flat. He fell in love with someone else and he just walked away. Mama tried so hard to hide how sad she was, putting on a brave face, but even then, I knew. Nico looked up then, and the pain was replaced by a startling fierceness in his young eyes. She's the best mom in the world. She didn't deserve that kind of treatment. She worked herself to the bone for us, and she has always been there for me. His small voice dropped to a choked whisper, heavy with adult resentment. I hate him for what he did to us. Dante felt his own reaction manifest physically. His right hand unconsciously curled into a tight, hard fist on the marble counter. He had witnessed countless men abandon their responsibilities and their families throughout his life in Naples. The sheer callousness of it never failed to fill him with silent disgust. His own father had been a cold, calculatedly cruel man, and Dante had carried the heavy burden of swearing he would never, ever replicate that behavior if he ever had children. And he hadn't. Not until fate had delivered its cruelest blow and violently ripped his own family from his grasp. If he walked through that door right now, I'd make sure to give him a piece of my mind, Nico added, the surprising venom in his small voice making Dante momentarily pause. Or maybe, the boy continued, casting a shy, quick glance at the imposing size of Dante's muscular arms, recognizing his own physical limitations. I could just let you give him a good punch. Despite the heavy and grim nature of the topic, a genuine, if fleeting sense of amusement touched Dante. He managed a slight, approving smirk. I think a man like that deserves far more than just one punch. Nico managed a tiny, watery grin at the thought and finally lifted his fork, taking a large bite of the omelette. His face immediately lit up with genuine appreciation for the simple, well-made food. This is really, really good, he murmured around the mouthful. I'm glad you like it, Dante replied, feeling a genuine surge of warmth. He was pleased to see Nico finally eating with some enthusiasm, clearly benefiting from a good night's rest and being momentarily relieved of immediate stress. As Nico continued to eat, savoring the food, Dante's phone vibrated discreetly on the marble counter. He picked it up instantly, recognizing the text was from Lorenzo. The message was terse and professional. Asterisk got a lead. The guy's full name is Paolo Romano. Checking his address now. We'll call soon. Asterisk Dante's pulse immediately picked up speed. A concrete lead, and so quickly. The extensive machinery of his organization was fully in motion. Thank God Lorenzo was so efficient. He quickly typed back a brief acknowledgement. Is it news about Mama? Nico asked quietly, his eyes fixed intently on Dante's suddenly serious expression as he looked at the screen. Dante gently placed the phone down. He didn't want to prematurely inflate the boy's hopes. My man found out the full name of the man your mother had dinner with, he confirmed carefully. Nico immediately swallowed his mouthful of omelette, anxiety erasing his appetite. Really? Paolo something, right? So he's real, not just a fake name he made up? Paolo Romano, Dante confirmed firmly. Do you know him? Had your mom ever met him before? Nico shook his head immediately. No, it was a blind date. Mama doesn't really date much, but her friend from school set this up for her. Her friend said Paolo was a cousin of someone she knew and promised he was a nice guy. Nico grimaced, the memory clearly painful. Some nice guy. Dante nodded, his expression grim. Sometimes friends don't truly know the people they vouch for either. Do you know the friend's name? The one who set up the date. Aunt Kiera. Well, she's not really my aunt, just Mama's friend. Miss Kiera. She teaches at the school with Mama, too. That could be another angle, Dante thought. Asterisk maybe the friend had unintentionally provided more information about Paolo's background or location. Asterisk he filed the name away mentally. For the moment, however, Lorenzo's team was already proving highly effective. As if waiting for his cue, Dante's phone started ringing instantly. The screen displayed Lorenzo's name. Dante answered with a clipped, immediate command. Talk to me. Lorenzo's voice was crisp, efficient, and all business. Boss, we have an address for Paolo Romano. He lives alone, mid-30s, small-time financial consultant. Nothing obvious on his criminal record, a few minor bar fights, maybe. But here's the detail you're going to love. Turns out a woman filed a police report against him about a year ago for harassment. She eventually dropped the charges, but the file is still active. Harassment? Dante's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles whitening, but he consciously forced his expression into a mask of neutrality for Nico's sake, knowing the boy was watching him intently from the counter. Ex-girlfriend, Lorenzo explained succinctly. She claimed he stalked her relentlessly after she tried to break up, showed up at her work, made veiled threats. She dropped the charges once he finally backed off, but it suggests our boy Paolo has some serious issues when it comes to rejection. Dante's eyes narrowed, his deduction hardening into certainty. That disturbing pattern perfectly fit the picture forming in his mind. Sophia likely sensed something unsettling about him and tried to politely end the date early, and Paolo, unable to handle the rejection, must have lost control. Did you find out where he might have taken her? Dante demanded. Not yet. We went by his apartment. No one answered. We're keeping eyes on the place, but his car is gone, too. A black Fiat sedan. We secured the plate number from a traffic cam situated near the restaurant that night. We tracked the car heading north out of the city about an hour after they left the restaurant. North out of Naples, Dante muttered, running the geography through his mind. That route branches widely. It could lead to smaller, forgotten towns, more remote rural areas, or curve sharply toward the coast. Did you get an exact final sighting or direction? The latest traffic cam caught him on the highway E45 heading toward Cassera around 10:30 p.m. That night, Lorenzo reported. After that, the trail goes cold. We're currently scanning other remote cams and aggressively asking around. Cassera is a small city not far off, but beyond that are increasingly remote areas. Dante's jaw tightened. If Paolo took her out of Naples, he likely had a prearranged hideout or location prepared. This escalating pattern was feeling less like a sudden, spur-of-the-moment crime and much more like the calculated actions of a practiced predator who knew exactly what he intended to do. Also, Lorenzo added grimly, dropping another dark detail, One of our reliable snitches in the area mentioned hearing about a guy asking around a week ago for some help regarding a new girl he was seeing, specifically looking for someone to maybe teach her a lesson if she didn't play nice. If that idiot was Paolo, he was planning this contingency in case of rejection. Dante's blood instantly boiled at the thought of this slimy coward plotting to inflict harm on Sophia merely because she dared to reject his advances. "Keep on it," Dante commanded, his voice tight. "I want his exact location pinned down as soon as humanly possible. I'll join you for the visit once you find him." "Understood, boss." Dante ended the call, disconnecting with a sharp thumb press, and noticed his hand was trembling slightly, a rare physical manifestation of his tightly contained rage. He drew a deep, stabilizing breath. Nico, who had been meticulously pretending not to eavesdrop but had clearly caught fragments of the conversation, asked timidly, "Did they find something bad?" Dante did not want to unduly terrify the child, yet he refused to lie to him now. "It sounds like the man your mother met might have gotten very angry with her," Dante admitted, keeping the details sparse. "We believe he took her somewhere outside the city, but we are getting closer to finding out exactly where." Nico's face went immediately pale, his small hands clenching the edge of the marble counter with white knuckles. "We have to hurry," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "What if he hurts her, or worse?" "We will hurry," Dante assured him immediately. He walked around the counter, stepping closer, and placed his hands gently yet firmly on Nico's small shoulders. "My men are doing literally everything they can right now. I promise you, I won't let anything happen to her. You have to trust me, okay?" The boy looked down, his long eyelashes wet with unshed tears. "I do trust you. It's just, I'm really scared for her." Dante felt an overwhelming, protective urge to pull the child into another embrace, seeing him struggle so fiercely to contain his fear, and so he acted on instinct. He wrapped one strong arm around Nico's thin shoulders and pulled him close against his side. "I know," he said quietly, holding him. "Being brave doesn't mean you aren't scared, Nico. It means you keep going, keep fighting, even when you are terrified. And you, Nico, are very brave." Nico sniffed once and leaned into Dante's strength for a scant few seconds before quickly straightening up, visibly embarrassed by his momentary surrender to vulnerability. He quickly wiped his eyes and nodded, the determination returning. "What do we do now? Can I help?" Dante admired the unwavering spirit of the boy, even knowing that there was little a child could realistically do in an ongoing manhunt. Still, keeping him focused and occupied was vital. "For now, you stay right here with me. If I have to leave, I'll arrange for someone completely trustworthy to watch you. Maybe later we can visit someone who might know more about this Paolo Romano, your friend, Miss Chiara. You can help me ask questions." Nico eagerly agreed, relieved to have a potential mission. Dante decided they both desperately needed a change of pace and fresh air to clear the sudden tension while they waited for the next communication. "Come, let's go to the garden for a while." The back of the villa opened onto a stunning, high-walled garden, a highly secure haven for Nico to get some sunlight without ever leaving the protected compound. It was a crisp, clear blue morning. Dante led Nico along ancient stone paths winding between meticulously manicured hedges and surrounding a small, bubbling fountain. Ordinarily, Dante barely registered the profound tranquility of his own secluded garden, but watching Nico pause to marvel at the vibrant crimson rose bushes and the weathered stone statue of St. Francis placed beneath an ancient olive tree gave him a fresh, appreciative perspective. Nico walked closely alongside Dante, his small hand occasionally brushing against the fabric of Dante's trousers, a small, subtle confirmation that the reassuring presence of the tall man was still beside him. Dante deliberately slowed his usual quick, purposeful stride to accommodate the child's shorter steps. At the edge of the fountain, Nico stopped and peered into the basin, where the still water reflected their twin forms, the small boy and the imposing man. "My mama would really like this garden," he said softly, wistfully. "She loves plants. We have a tiny little balcony, and she grows basil and rosemary and some flowers, too." Dante watched the morning sunlight catch the warm, deep brown of Nico's eyes. In that suspended moment, he allowed himself to imagine Sophia standing right there in his garden, perhaps smiling genuinely as her son eagerly showed her the flowering hedges. It was a quiet, profoundly domestic vision, and the sudden, jarring pleasantness of it felt radically out of place against Dante's established life of ruthless deals and calculated violence. "She's welcome to visit this garden any time," Dante stated. Then, lowering his voice, he added a vow. "Once we bring her home." Nico looked up at him, correcting the phrase and managing a fragile, hopeful smile. "When we bring her home." Dante gently placed his large hand on the boy's head, a natural paternal gesture that startled him. He realized he was growing deeply attached to Nico at an alarming, unprecedented pace. But how could he not? The child possessed such fierce spirit, keen intelligence, and a heart as resilient and expansive as any Dante had ever encountered. He absolutely deserved a safe, happy life, and Dante was determined to ensure he got it, alongside his mother. The jarring sound of Dante's phone ringing again violently shattered the tranquility of the garden. He answered instantly, seeing Lorenzo's number flash on the screen. This time, Lorenzo had the concrete location. "Old canned goods factory outside Cassera," he reported, a slight breathlessness in his voice indicating he was already in motion. "The car was spotted by a local who owes us a big favor. It's parked inside an old warehouse on the property. We've heard intermittent rumors of sketchy activity there, but nothing concrete until now. We're already here, heading up, but I've held off on going inside until you give the word." "You did good," Dante said, adrenaline surging through his veins, washing away the remnants of the morning's domestic calm. "I'm on my way now. Do not, under any circumstances, go in until I arrive. If Paolo has her, and possibly others, we need a careful, organized approach." "Roger that. We've got a team of 4 already in position watching all known exits." "I'll bring a couple more men with me," Dante confirmed. "And Lorenzo, this is critical. Make sure no one spooks him into doing anything rash. We want her alive and unharmed." "Understood, boss." Dante ended the call. His face was now a hard, expressionless mask of absolute resolve. Nico was watching him, every muscle in his small body tensed with fear and anticipation. "They found where she is," Dante told the boy, deciding transparency was necessary. "We think she's being held in an old factory outside the city. I am going there now to bring her back." Nico's eyes widened, a mixture of immense relief warring instantly with a terrifying new dread. "I want to come," he blurted out instantly. Dante shook his head, instantly shutting down the idea. "No, absolutely not, Nico. It's too dangerous. These people are likely armed." The boy looked ready to argue fiercely, but Dante knelt down quickly, meeting him eye to eye, and placed both hands firmly on Nico's arms. "Listen to me closely. The single best way you can help your mother is by staying safe here. If I have to spend even a second worrying about your safety, I cannot focus entirely on getting her out. Do you understand that?" Tears of frustration and deep yearning to help brimmed in Nico's eyes, but the logic was undeniably sound. Slowly, he nodded, though the anguish of being sidelined was palpable. Dante continued, "I'm going to leave you with someone I absolutely trust while I go handle this. I will bring her back, Nico. You have my solemn word." Nico sniffled hard, then, surprisingly, flung his arms around Dante's neck again, holding on tightly. Please bring her back," he whispered urgently into Dante's shoulder. Dante briefly hugged him back, pulling the boy tight against his chest. "I will," he promised. He gently pried the boy loose and stood up. Dante immediately took out his phone to make a crucial call. He dialed Angelo, one of his oldest and most trusted lieutenants, who fortunately also possessed a kind, natural way with children, having 3 of his own. Dante instructed Angelo to come to the villa immediately to stand guard over Nico until his return. Within 10 tense minutes, Angelo arrived. A bald, burly, middle-aged man whose gentle smile contradicted his formidable build. He greeted Nico with immediate kindness, while Dante pulled him urgently aside and gave rapid, firm instructions. Nico was to be kept inside, secure, and safe at all costs. Then came the gravest instruction. If Dante failed to return by nightfall, or if something went critically wrong, Angelo was to take Nico immediately and hide him in a deep, secure location. Angelo simply nodded. Dante hadn't needed to voice the worst-case scenario. If Dante fell during the fight, the boy still needed absolute protection from any enemies who might retaliate. Nico stood rigidly by the doorway, anxiously wringing his small hands as Dante finished his preparations. Dante crouched down one last time, locking his gaze with the boy's. "I'll be back with your mom. I promise you that." Nico nodded, desperately clutching onto this final assurance. Dante reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a simple, pre-programmed cell phone, one he had loaded only with his direct line and Angelo's. It was basic, easy for a child to operate. He pressed the device into Nico's hand. "This is for you. If you hear anything, or need anything at all, you call me or Angelo immediately. I'll call you as soon as we have your mother safe." Nico clutched the phone tightly to his chest. "Be careful, Dante." Hearing his bare name spoken by the boy was a surprise, a subtle jolt. It was the first time Nico had omitted the formal titles. Asterisk or Senior Dante. It felt strangely profound, marking the definitive formation of a real, protective bond between them. Dante managed a tight, reassuring smile. "I will. And hey, when we come back, maybe we'll all sit down and have dinner together. I bet your mama would really like that." A fragile flicker of a smile touched Nico's lips at the domestic image of them all together, safe. "I'd like that too." With that gentle promise hanging palpably in the air, Dante rose to his full height and strode purposefully out the doorway. As he left, he distinctly heard Nico's soft, pleading voice call out behind him one last time. "Please bring my mom home, Dante." The quiet desperation of those words was the final fuel poured onto the fire that now burned relentlessly in Dante's veins. Dante climbed into his armored black Maserati. 3 of his best soldiers were already waiting, one seated in the passenger side, 2 others securing positions in a trailing SUV. Dante would not ordinarily deploy this level of manpower to neutralize a single financial consultant, but the potential for additional armed thugs or multiple victims at the factory meant he needed overwhelming force. Tires screeched aggressively on the gravel driveway as they sped out of the secure estate. Dante's jaw was set like granite, and his eyes burned with a singular, lethal focus. He had given his word to the boy, and more importantly, to himself. Now it was time for fulfillment. Sophia was waiting, and Dante vowed that God help anyone who dared stand in the path of his resolve. The abandoned factory loomed ominously at the end of a long, dusty access road. A hulking skeleton of decaying concrete and rusted metal baking silently beneath the harsh midday sun. Dante's Maserati and the trailing SUV slid, to a synchronized halt, behind a dense stand of overgrown oleander bushes, concealed from the main structure. He stepped out, the dry grass crunching beneath his heavy leather boots, and immediately began surveying the dilapidated grounds. Lorenzo emerged swiftly from the deep shadows of a crumbling side building, jogging over to meet him, trailed by 2 more armed men. Dante was instantly all business, his senses sharpened to maximum alert. "What's the situation?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low register. Lorenzo pointed toward the largest structure, a vast warehouse attached to the main factory floor. "The cars are inside there. We've counted at least 2 armed men patrolling the perimeter. Likely more inside. No sign of Romano or the woman from outside, but old blueprints confirm the structure has a basement level. That's likely where they're keeping them." Dante's eyes narrowed dangerously, so Paolo was not operating in isolation. He had hired at least a few thugs to assist in the kidnapping, perhaps the muscle he'd sought out, as Lorenzo had reported earlier. That complicated the extraction slightly, demanding caution, but it was certainly nothing Dante and his experienced team couldn't handle. Dante formulated his attack plan in seconds. "Okay, we go in quiet. Marco and Vito." He signaled 2 of his accompanying men. "Circle around the back entrance and neutralize any lookout silently. Lorenzo, you and Sergio will advance with me at the front loading door. Suppressors on all weapons. We breach in exactly 2 minutes. His men nodded sharply, their faces grim and utterly determined. Guns were checked a final time. Suppressors were carefully screwed onto the barrels with soft, precise clicks. Dante drew his own preferred handgun, a heavy Beretta, and affixed a suppressor from his jacket pocket. They moved with swift, practiced silence. Marco and Vito seemed to simply melt into the thick shrubbery, disappearing toward the rear access. Dante, Lorenzo, and Sergio crept along the decaying front wall, bodies pressed tightly against the graffiti-stained concrete. The main loading door of the warehouse was slightly ajar, enough of a gap for a man to slip underneath. Dante lowered himself and peered through the narrow opening. Inside, the vast, cavernous space was dim, lit only by streaks of high windows and a few low-hanging work lamps that threw immense, distorting shadows. Dust motes swirled lazily in the stale, heavy air. Centered in the massive room was Paolo's black Fiat sedan, confirming beyond doubt that they had found the right location. A bored-looking thug, a rifle slung carelessly over his shoulder, paced near the parked car. A second guard stood sentinel by a metal door that likely led deeper inside, perhaps to the offices or the basement stairs. Suddenly, a distinct but muffled clatter echoed from the rear of the enormous structure. Marco or Vito had clearly found and neutralized a lookout near the back exit. The guard near the Fiat immediately stiffened, his attention momentarily diverted toward the sound. Dante seized the sliver of opportunity. With a swift, silent gesture, he and his 2 men slipped under the loading door and moved like wraiths along the shadowed perimeter. Dante closed the distance to the distracted guard near the car in a blur of motion. The man only began to turn back just as Dante slammed the heavy butt of his suppressed pistol straight into his temple. The guard dropped instantly, collapsing without so much as a sigh. Simultaneously, Lorenzo and Sergio took precise aim at the second thug by the inner door. The report of 2 silenced shots was barely louder than a hiss of escaping air. The second thug crumpled against the door frame, a rapid dark bloom spreading across his chest. Dante signaled his men forward, and they converged swiftly on the old metal door the second guard had been watching. It was slightly ajar. Muffled voices, a distinct sound of weeping, and a man's harsh, agitated bark could be clearly heard from below. Dante's heart hammered against his ribs. Sophia. She was right there. He gently eased the door open. Beyond lay a dark stairwell plunging downwards, illuminated weakly by a single bare bulb. The sounds of distress intensified, echoing sharply off the concrete walls. Dante led the descent, suppressed weapon raised and ready. Lorenzo and Sergio followed close behind, their movements tight and cautious. At the bottom of the stairs was a short, damp hallway. The scene that greeted Dante's eyes instantly sent his blood temperature soaring. A makeshift holding area had been crudely set up in what looked like an old, concrete storage basement, lit poorly by a few harsh work lights and battery-operated lanterns. Against the far wall, cowering, were 4 women. They were all bound, terrified, tear-streaked, and severely disheveled. One was softly weeping, while another attempted to offer shaky comfort despite her own palpable fear. A thin, nervous-looking man stood guard directly in front of them, gripping a cheap pistol, likely another hired thug. A bit further away, pacing erratically, was Paolo Romano himself. Dante recognized him instantly from the description. Mid-30s, average build with a neat beard, now sweaty, and an expensive suit that was rumpled and dirty. "I told you all to shut up," Paolo snapped viciously at the women, his voice unnaturally high-strung and close to shattering. He looked completely unhinged, beads of nervous sweat glistening on his forehead. Dante's gaze sliced across the hostages. 3 of the women were strangers, but the 4th, Sophia. He saw her at once, situated at the end of the line. Her hands were tied in front of her, the rope looping cruelly around her ankles as well. Her dark hair was a mess, her lip was split, and a sickening bruise marred her cheek. But she was alive. Dante's heart pounded violently. a sickening mix of powerful relief that she was breathing and white-hot fury that she had been harmed. She was pale, yes, but her eyes were not broken. They were burning, furious. Even bound and helpless on the cold concrete floor, Sophia was glaring up at Paolo with pure, unadulterated hatred. "Paolo, please." Sophia tried to reason, her voice hoarse from crying or shouting, yet strained to maintain a semblance of calm. "Let these other women go. They have absolutely nothing to do with this. You don't have to." "Shut up, Sophia," Paolo screamed, spinning violently to face her, his features contorted in manic rage. "This is your fault. If you had just behaved, just listened to me, none of this would have happened." He punctuated his words with a wild, trembling gesture of the small handgun clutched in his fist, pointing the muzzle directly towards Sophia's chest. She flinched almost imperceptibly, yet straightened her spine, lifting her chin in defiance. That single, bold movement, the sight of Paolo threatening the mother of Nico, snapped the last thread of Dante's restraint. He gripped his pistol so tightly that his knuckles gleamed stark white against the dark metal. He moved, a predator stepping into the light. Dante advanced quietly, his boots barely whispering on the concrete floor. Lorenzo and Sergio fanned out instantly, silent shadows finding strategic cover, securing every potential angle of attack. The nervous thug guarding the other women was oblivious, his attention riveted by Paolo's increasingly unhinged tirade. Paolo was truly raving now, frothing at the mouth. "You think you can reject me? Embarrass me at the restaurant? Huh? Acting like you're too good for me?" He was breathing heavily, ragged gasps tearing through his chest, his eyes manic and dilated. "I was doing you a favor, you stupid woman. Who else would want a used-up thing like you with a brat in tow? I was willing to overlook that." Dante felt a hot, blinding red haze descend over him. How dare this animal speak of her and Nico that way? Sophia responded with startling ferocity. She spat, the sharp glob landing squarely near Paolo's expensive shoe, surprising Dante with her sheer, desperate courage. Her voice trembled, strained from fear and effort, yet it was laced with pure venom. "I would rather die than be with a man like you. You're sick, Paolo. Kidnapping women, hurting them. You'll rot in prison for this." Paolo's face twisted into an ugly mask of hatred and disbelief. He took a heavy, menacing step toward her. "Rot in prison? No, darling, I don't think so. You see, men like me, we can do whatever we want. I have friends. I have money. And women like you are just toys to be played with until we're bored." Dante had heard enough. As Paolo loomed over Sophia, raising his hand, the clear intention to strike her evident, Dante stepped fully out of the deep shadows of the doorway. His voice was a whip crack, slicing through the air like a poisoned dagger. "Touch her, and that will be the last thing you ever do." The entire room froze. The silence was immediate and absolute. Paolo spun around, shock and confusion colliding in his eyes as he registered the sight of Dante Costa and the steady, unwavering muzzle of his pistol leveled directly at his face. The thin thug near the hostages let out a terrified yelp of surprise and fumbled desperately for his own weapon. But he was too slow. A swift, muffled thwip sounded. A single suppressed shot from Lorenzo. The thug dropped instantly, collapsing to the floor with a dull, heavy thud that caused the terrified women to cry out in renewed fright. "Who the hell are you?" Paolo blustered, his gun hand wavering wildly as he struggled to assess this new, deadly threat that had materialized from thin air. Dante stepped closer, his presence radiating a cold, implacable death. "Dante Costa, Nico's friend." He almost said, "Nico's father," in the searing heat of the moment, but managed to catch himself just in time. "Let me give you some free advice, Paolo," Dante said, his tone deceptively soft, edged with Arctic frost. "Insulting a woman and threatening her child is a very quick way to sign your own death warrant." Paolo's face cycled through confusion, a flicker of horrified recognition. Perhaps he had heard the name Dante Costa whispered in the hushed, fearful corners of the Neapolitan underworld. And then, pure, naked fear. His bravado crumbled for a sickening moment. Behind him, Sophia's eyes had widened. She finally processed who had come. "Dante?" she breathed, the sound thin and laced with disbelief, hope, and overwhelming relief flashing across her face. But Paolo was cornered and desperate. With a panicked surge of adrenaline, he lunged, quickly moving behind Sophia, grabbing her roughly around the neck and waist. He yanked her upright and clutched her tight against his chest, pressing the cold steel of his handgun hard against her temple. Sophia gasped, her bound feet struggling uselessly to find balance as Paolo utilized her as a living, breathing human shield. "Back off!" Paolo screamed, panic now fully creeping into his voice, turning it raw. I'll shoot her. I swear I will. Don't think I won't." Dante halted instantly, his gun still trained, but a fierce frustration flared in his chest. One wrong twitch from the panicked man, and Sophia would be hurt. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lorenzo and Sergio subtly shift, repositioning themselves, desperately trying to find a fractional, clear shot. But Paolo was smart enough in his terror to keep Sophia directly and perfectly between him and Dante's men. "You're making a big mistake," Dante said evenly, his eyes locked on Paolo's sweaty, terrified face. "If you harm her, there is nowhere on earth you can hide from me. I will find you." Paolo laughed hysterically, the sound unhinged and ragged. "You think I'm scared of you? You're just some thug. I'm already screwed, aren't I? You think I don't know that?" Sweat glistened on his temple. Dante could see the man's finger twitching near the trigger, a clear sign of dangerous instability. For a split second, Dante's eyes met Sophia's. She was breathing fast, fear evident. Yet something else gathered in that moment. A ferocious resolve, a sudden, blinding courage. It happened in an instant. Sophia suddenly drove her elbow back with all the strength she possessed, slamming it deep into Paolo's ribs. It wasn't a devastating blow given her physical condition, but it was completely unexpected. Paolo grunted loudly in pain and surprise, his grip on her body and the gun loosening just enough. Dante didn't hesitate. Bang. A single gunshot roared in the enclosed space, deafening without the usual suppressor. Dante had taken the critical shot. His bullet tore into Paolo's shoulder, making the man howl in agony and drop the handgun immediately as his arm went limp and useless. In a fit of blinding fury and pain, Paolo shoved Sophia away and lunged for his dropped pistol with his other, remaining hand. But Dante was already sprinting. Quicker than Paolo could react, Dante kicked the weapon across the floor, sending it skittering far out of reach. The two men collided, Dante slamming Paolo hard against the wall with the force of a battering ram. Dante's powerful forearm pressed relentlessly against Paolo's throat as the man struggled, gasping like a landed fish. "You're done," Dante hissed at Paolo, who clawed uselessly at Dante's arm, his eyes bulging as oxygen was cut off. You can't kill me," he choked out, his face rapidly turning red and mottled. "If you do, you're no better than M." Dante's patience snapped entirely. He grabbed Paolo by the collar, ripping him away from the wall, and slammed him down hard onto the concrete floor. Paolo coughed violently, scrambling backwards clumsily on his elbows. Fear now fully consumed his features as he looked up at Dante, who towered over him like a vengeful, dark angel. "You thought you could lay a hand on her and live?" Dante's voice was dangerously quiet, resonating with deadly intent. He kicked Paolo hard, precisely in the stomach. The man yelped, curling up instantly in fetal position. "You made a mistake, a very big one." Paolo's eyes darted around desperately, searching for any sign of help, but all his accomplices were neutralized. Lorenzo and Sergio had already secured the remaining area and were efficiently untying the other women. The women, now freed, huddled together, gazing at Dante with a mix of awe and terror as he brutally finished dealing with their tormentor. Dante grabbed Paolo by the scruff of his shirt and hauled him upright. The man whimpered pitifully, the gunshot wound in his shoulder having rendered one arm completely useless. "Pee please," Paolo blathered, fresh blood oozing between his fingers where he clutched his injured shoulder. "Please don't kill me. I can pay." Dante's lip curled in cold disgust. "Your money is worthless." He drove Paolo back into a concrete pillar and pressed the muzzle of his pistol hard under the man's chin. "Give me one good reason I shouldn't end you right now. Dante." Sophia's voice cut through the hot fog of rage that clouded Dante's mind. She spoke his name firmly, though her voice was strained and ragged. "Don't kill him." Dante glanced toward her. Sophia was on her feet, having been untied by Lorenzo moments before. She was a little unsteady, swaying slightly, but she was upright, her hands free now though raw and chafed from the ropes. Her dark eyes stared at Dante with a powerful, pleading intensity. "He deserves it," Dante growled, not loosening his hold on the trembling Paolo. The thought of letting this monster live after what he had done was utterly unthinkable to Dante in that moment. "Maybe he does," Sophia said, taking a hesitant step forward. She winced, her ankle might have been twisted when she was shoved aside, but she limped toward Dante anyway. "But not like this. Not in front of them." She tilted her head subtly toward the other women who were watching, their eyes wide and frightened, absorbing every moment. Dante instantly understood what she meant. These women had endured enough horror. Seeing a man executed in front of them might scar them further, inflicting a new, final trauma. And perhaps, beneath that practical concern, Sophia didn't want blood on Dante's hands in her presence. Dante took a deep, steadying breath, wrestling his savage fury back under iron control. He gave Paolo a final, utterly contemptuous sneer and cracked him hard across the jaw with the pistol's heavy grip. Instead of pulling the trigger, Dante watched Paolo's eyes roll back into his head, and the kidnapper slumped instantly, unconscious, to the ground. "Tie him up," Dante ordered Sergio, who immediately moved to secure Paolo tightly with the very same ropes that had been used on the women. Dante stepped away from the crumpled figure, turning fully toward Sophia. For a long, profound moment, Dante and Sophia simply looked at each other. In her eyes, Dante saw clear recognition, deep relief, and a crashing wave of emotion that perfectly mirrored his own. He couldn't quite find his voice. The massive surge of gratitude that she was alive and, relatively, unharmed nearly stole his breath. Sophia moved first. She closed the remaining distance and threw her arms tightly around Dante's neck, clinging to him as if he were the only solid, unmoving thing left in the world. Dante tensed in surprise, then immediately enveloped her in his strong arms, one hand cradling the back of her head, pulling her close. He felt the intense, residual trembling in her body against him. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fracturing with unshed tears. "Dante, thank you. I knew Nico would find help. I prayed it would be you." Her words made something essential tighten in Dante's throat. He held her a fraction closer, inhaling the faint, dusty scent of her hair. "I promised Nico I would bring you back," he said quietly into her ear. "He's a brave kid, Sophia. He loves you so much." Sophia let out a soft, choked sob upon hearing that and pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You found him? Nico? Is he okay?" "Yes, he's safe at my home. He's been waiting for you." Dante gently brushed a stray tear from her cheek with his thumb, his touch lingering perhaps longer than strictly necessary. "He never gave up. He came to me for help. Smart boy." Sophia managed a fragile, watery smile, her eyes shining with new tears. "He is smart. Too smart sometimes." She swallowed hard. "I can't believe he actually went to you. I was so worried he'd be all alone." "He was alone," Dante said softly, a dark vein of fresh anger creeping back into his voice at the thought. "He waited for you for 2 days entirely on his own. When he realized you weren't coming home, he was desperate. The police ignored him." Dante's jaw clenched hard. "It shouldn't have come to that." Sophia closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her temple. "My poor baby. He must have been so scared." She opened her eyes again, fresh determination replacing the fear. "I need to see him. I need to know he's okay with my own eyes." You will, Dante assured her. He glanced around. Lorenzo was already leading the other women out of the basement, supporting those who were weak, guiding them gently up the rough stairs. They would be taken care of. Dante had already texted one of his trusted men to call a medical team to meet them at the drop-off point. Those women would get home, or wherever they needed, safely now. Sergio dragged the unconscious Paolo along the floor like a sack of garbage. "Boss, what do you want done with this piece of filth?" he asked, not bothering to hide his contempt. Dante looked at Paolo with cold, lethal eyes. There were 1,000 slow, painful things he wanted to do to him. But feeling Sophia's hand still resting lightly, trustingly on his arm, he made a calculated decision. "Turn him over to the authorities," Dante said quietly. Sergio raised an eyebrow in surprise. Normally, the boss handled such matters internally, often terminally, but he understood this was a special case requiring a cleaner exit. "We'll make sure he and his buddies are found at the scene, tied up, with plenty of evidence of exactly what they did." "Good." Dante's lips curled in a cruel approximation of a smile. "And let it slip to some of our friends in prison exactly what he did to those women. I'm sure he'll receive a very warm welcome behind bars." Sergio gave a brief, satisfied chuckle. "Understood." With that, Dante turned back to Sophia. Her legs looked unsteady, and for the first time, he truly realized the full extent of her condition. She was running solely on adrenaline. He noticed she had no shoes. Her feet were dirty, and one ankle was noticeably swollen. Without another word, Dante scooped her effortlessly into his arms. Sophia let out a soft gasp of surprise. "Dante, I can walk. Let me. Please," he said, more gruffly than he intended, cutting her off. He didn't want her collapsing on the way out or injuring that ankle further, and a part of him just desperately needed to hold her, to feel for himself that she was truly safe now. Sophia acquiesced, wrapping an arm around his shoulder and resting her head meekly against his chest. Dante carried her up the stairs, careful to shield her body from brushing against the rough walls. As they emerged into the brilliant sunlight outside the warehouse, Sophia squinted at the brightness. The black SUV was brought around, and Dante gently set Sophia down by the open door. He removed his tailored jacket, expensive, dark wool, and placed it carefully around her shoulders when he noticed she was shivering, despite the warm day. It was likely shock finally setting in. She pulled the jacket around herself gratefully, the fabric smelling faintly of expensive cologne and gunpowder. Before helping her into the car, Dante took out his phone. He remembered his promise to Nico. Finding Sophia was only part of it. The boy needed to hear her voice. He dialed the number of the burner phone he had given Nico. It rang only once before a small, breathless voice answered. "Dante, did you find her? Mama?" Dante felt Sophia's hand grip his arm tightly when she heard Nico's voice faintly through the receiver. He smiled down at her, a genuine smile that rarely reached his eyes. "Nico, I've got someone here who wants to talk to you." He handed the phone to Sophia. Her hands trembled violently as she brought it to her ear. "Nico, sweetheart." "Mama. Mama, is that you?" Nico's voice burst out, cracking with overwhelming emotion. "It's me, my love," Sophia said, tears streaming freely down her face, her relief visible and painful. "I'm okay now." On the other end, Nico started sobbing uncontrollably in sheer relief. "Mama, I was so scared. I thought." "I know, baby, I know." Sophia choked up, her own voice thick with tears. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. But Dante brought me back. I'm safe now, and I'll be with you soon. Promise. Please come soon, Mama," Nico cried desperately. "I'm waiting. I'm on my way," she soothed. "I love you so much, Nico." "I love you too, Mama. So much." There was a brief pause, then a shy, earnest whisper came through the speaker. And tell Dante thank you. And I love him too." Sophia glanced up at Dante, her eyes widening slightly at Nico's unexpected words. Dante felt his heart constrict sharply in his chest. He turned away for a second, pretending to check on the loading of the other women into another vehicle, just to regain his composure. Sophia whispered into the phone. I will. We both will, together. She listened a moment more to Nico's voice, then said, See you very soon, honey. I need to go now so I can come to you. Okay. They exchanged goodbyes, and Sophia handed the phone back to Dante, tears still glistening in her eyes, but a radiant smile now illuminating her face. He sounds okay, she said softly, her voice filled with deep gratitude. Because of you, Dante corrected gently. Because he's a remarkable kid who refused to give up. I just did what he asked me to. Sophia reached out and took Dante's hand, squeezing it firmly. You did so much more than that. I heard what happened, how you took him in, fed him, comforted him. You saved me, Dante. I can never repay you for that. Dante looked down at their joined hands, then back into her eyes. You don't owe me anything. I'm just sorry it took me 2 days to get to you. She lifted his hand to her lips suddenly and pressed a gentle, feather-light kiss to the back of it. The gesture was intimate, loaded with unspoken emotion. Dante's breath hitched, her warmth on his skin, the softness of that simple kiss. It sent a powerful jolt through him, bypassing his layers of defense. You kept your promise to Nico, Sophia murmured, her gaze unwavering. That's everything. For a long moment, they simply gazed at each other. Dante felt a nearly overwhelming urge to lean in and kiss her properly. Her bravery, her profound love for her son, her fierce resilience. Everything about this woman drew him in like an irresistible magnetic force. He realized abruptly that it wasn't just Nico who had grown attached. Dante himself had fallen far harder and faster than he ever expected. But he held himself back. This wasn't the time. She had just endured trauma and was terribly vulnerable. And he was what he was. A mafia don. A man steeped in blood and danger. Did he have any right to even think of bringing someone like her and her innocent child into his life permanently? Dante cleared his throat gently and helped Sophia into the back seat of the SUV. Let's get you home. He sat beside her for the journey back, unable to resist keeping her hand tightly laced in his. She didn't object. In fact, she leaned heavily against his shoulder, eyes closed as sheer exhaustion finally began to overcome her adrenaline. As they drove away from that dreadful, derelict place, sirens could be heard wailing in the distance, undoubtedly called in anonymously to collect the trash Dante had left behind. But in the luxurious interior of the vehicle, there was silence, broken only by Sophia's soft, even breathing and the gentle hum of the engine. Dante allowed himself a brief moment to close his eyes and savor the profound relief of success. Sophia was safe. Nico would have his mother back in his arms soon. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, Dante couldn't shake the subtle ache forming in his chest. The way Nico's small voice had unknowingly called him family, and the way Sophia clung to him now, exhausted and trusting. It felt so completely, terrifyingly right, and that terrified Dante more than any gunfight because it made him want things he had sworn never to want again. When Dante's SUV pulled silently through the towering gates of his estate, it was nearly evening. The setting sun hung low, casting a rich, golden light over the sprawling villa's manicured gardens. Before the car even rolled to a complete stop by the main entrance, the front door of the house flew open. Nico burst out and sprinted down the wide marble steps toward the driveway, Angelo following close behind to make sure he didn't trip and fall. The boy's face was a mixture of overwhelming anticipation and raw anxiety, his eyes red and puffy as if he'd been crying and refusing to move from the door since the phone call. Dante stepped out first, his demeanor instantly guarded, and barely had time to open the back door for Sophia before Nico barreled into him. Dante! Nico gasped, clutching Dante's legs briefly, then quickly wriggling past to see inside the car. Mama! Sophia swung her legs out and emerged, still draped in Dante's oversized jacket, looking tired and battered, but gloriously, powerfully alive. The instant Nico saw her, he let out a sharp, wrenching wail of pure, unadulterated relief. Mama! Sophia dropped instantly to her knees on the gravel drive, heedless of the rough stones, opening her arms wide. Nico collided with her, nearly knocking her backward as he wrapped himself around her in a fierce, desperate hug. "Mama, mama, mama," he cried into her shoulder, sobbing openly now, letting loose the torrent of fear he had suppressed for 2 agonizing days. Sophia was crying too, holding him so tightly as if she'd never let go. "I'm here, baby. I'm here," she whispered, smoothing his hair, kissing the top of his head again and again. "My sweet boy, I'm so sorry. I'm here now." Dante stepped back a pace, granting them privacy. Angelo quietly ushered the other men away as well, directing them to carry out tasks elsewhere, sensing this reunion was a private, sacred moment. Dante watched mother and son cling to each other and felt a painful lump form in his throat. This was what he had fought for, the pure, unbreakable bond of family reuniting. It was beautiful and heartbreaking all at once, stirring up memories he usually kept deeply buried. After a long moment, Nico pulled back just enough to look at Sophia's face. He sniffled, reaching a small, trembling hand to touch a bruise on her cheek gently. "He hurt you," Nico said, his voice shaking with a mixture of anger and profound guilt. "I'm sorry, Mama. I should have." "No, Nico. None of that," Sophia said firmly, wiping his tears away with her thumbs. "You have nothing to be sorry for. You saved me. Do you hear? You did everything right, my love. You were so brave." She gave a watery, trembling laugh. "My little superhero." Nico managed a slight, shaky smile at that through his tears and hugged her fiercely again. Dante felt a delicate, warm hand slip into his own. He looked down to see Sophia reaching for him, gently pulling him closer to the embrace. He allowed her to draw him in. Nico released one arm from his mother and flung it tightly around Dante too, pulling him in so that the 3 of them were locked in a tight, desperate circle. "Thank you, Dante," Nico mumbled from where his face was pressed against Sophia's shoulder, his other arm gripping Dante's waist. "Thank you for bringing my mom back." Sophia nodded in solemn agreement, her cheek resting against Dante's chest now as she held both her son and the man who had saved them. "Thank you," she echoed softly, looking up at Dante with eyes shining with gratitude and something much more profound. Something like affection, perhaps nascent love. Dante's throat worked, thick with emotion. He raised one hand and placed it gently on Nico's head, and his other hand lightly on Sophia's back. He wanted to freeze this moment in time, sealing it away from the chaos that had just passed. The encompassing warmth of 2 precious people holding on to him, their grip not born out of fear or lingering obligation, but out of pure, deep love and palpable relief. He closed his eyes, allowing himself just a fleeting second to feel the sensation fully, letting it sink into his bones. It had been decades since he'd felt anchored, truly like part of a family unit. The unfamiliar intimacy was almost too much to bear, a raw, blinding joy so sharp it felt like a wound. Eventually, the necessity of the moment forced them all to pull back slightly, though the air between them still thrummed with connection. Sophia impulsively cupped Dante's face with both hands, a surprisingly bold, utterly natural gesture that caught him completely off guard. Her eyes, still slightly bruised but shining with fierce light, searched his face, as if looking beyond the surface. "Your heart?" she murmured, her thumb brushing gently near his temple, tracing the line of a dark stain. Dante realized with a jolt he had forgotten all about the minor injuries in the aftermath of the adrenaline surge. Paolo had clearly managed to land a glancing blow on his cheekbone or jaw at some point. It was just a bruise, a minor cut. "It's nothing," he dismissed, trying to reassure her. But Sophia's delicate brows knitted immediately in worry. She fussed over him, her touch feather-light as she gently wiped away a streak of dried blood he hadn't realized was streaked along his jawline. "He must have fought you," she stated, her voice tight with disapproval. Dante shrugged, casually trying to downplay the significance of the exchange. "I've had worse skirmishes." Nico frowned up at him, his small face etched with concern, mirroring his mother's gravity. "You got hurt for us?" the boy observed seriously. "It's really nothing, Nico?" Dante insisted softly, feeling a sudden tenderness toward the boy's earnest distress. Sophia sighed, her hand lingering against Dante's cheek, her palm warm and comforting. He found himself involuntarily leaning subtly into her touch, drawn by the simple offering of care. She realized the minute movement, the silent offering of his trust, and slowly let her fingers slip away, a faint, lovely blush rising to tint her cheeks despite the severity of their circumstances. "Let's go inside," Dante said, abruptly clearing his throat to regain control. "Both of you urgently need rest and probably some professional medical attention. I have a doctor I trust implicitly on the way. He's discreet to check on you, Sophia, and to make sure Nico's entirely all right, too." Sophia nodded appreciatively, the exhaustion finally pulling at her features. But as she attempted to stand, she winced visibly as a spike of sharp pain shot through her ankle from bearing her full weight. In a flash, Dante moved, effortlessly scooping her into his arms again, the need to protect her overriding any residual thought of proper formalities. "Oh," Sophia gasped softly, leaning her head against his shoulder. Then she released a gentle, tired chuckle, looping her arms securely around his neck. "I suppose I should get used to you constantly carrying me." Nico, ever vigilant, hovered anxiously at Dante's side, his eyes fixed on his mother, looking genuinely concerned for her welfare. Dante gave the boy a quick, firm, reassuring nod. "Your mom will be fine. She just shouldn't walk right now. I've got her." As Dante carried Sophia into the vast, silent elegance of the villa, Nico held tightly on to the fabric of Dante's sleeve, walking in perfect step with him as if afraid to let either of them, his mother or his rescuer, out of his sight for even a moment. Inside, Dante settled Sophia gently on a plush, oversized sofa in the expansive living room. Nico immediately climbed up beside her, clinging to her hand tightly, his small face pressed close to her arm. Before long, the doctor arrived, an older man with practiced hands and a demeanor of quiet competence, who had been on Dante's personal payroll for years, attending to various discreet needs. He expertly examined Sophia's visible bruises and her painful ankle, diagnosing it as a mild sprain, cleaned the small cuts, and pronounced confidently that with rest and proper care, she'd be completely fine. He offered some strong painkillers, which Sophia accepted gratefully. Nico steadfastly refused to leave his mother's side throughout the examination, and Dante stood sentinel nearby, arms folded tightly across his chest, his gaze unwavering as he watched the proceedings with deep concern. After the doctor made his farewells, Angelo quietly informed Dante that the mop-up operation had been efficiently handled. Paolo and his pathetic goons were already found and detained by the local police. The other women were confirmed safe and were receiving immediate aid and support, and the media had somehow, thanks to some strategic, untraceable anonymous tips, caught wind of a massive, high-profile human trafficking ring bust. Dante nodded, his expression satisfied that Paolo's dark crimes would finally see the brutal light of day, and the victims would receive the necessary help without his own name or organization ever publicly surfacing. Sophia insisted she was well enough to stand and voiced her strong desire to freshen up. So Dante guided her and Nico to the lavish guest room suite, the very same one Nico had slept in the night before. He left them to their privacy to shower and change, providing Sophia with some of his most comfortable, soft clothes since her own garments were now soiled, torn, and dirty from her ordeal. During that essential time, Dante found himself restlessly pacing the length of the living room, his mind finally running wild now that the immediate, life-threatening crisis was definitively over. Now reality, cold and uncompromising, began to creep in. What was he going to do next? A strong, deep part of him yearned desperately to invite them both to stay here, indefinitely, to stand as their constant guardian, to protect and care for them for the rest of his days. But his rational, hardened side and the ancient, dark fear rooted deeply in his past trauma warned violently against such foolish attachment. By the time Sophia emerged, dressed in one of Dante's starched white shirts and a pair of simple drawstring pants, which were comically oversized, hanging loosely, but she had neatly rolled the sleeves and cuffs to fit her petite frame, Dante had visibly steeled himself against temptation. Nico was right beside her, also changed back into the spare clothes Dante had given him earlier. They looked, Dante observed with a shocking wave of emotion, like they completely belonged here. Sophia in his clothes, smelling faintly of his expensive soap, and Nico clearly at ease and comfortable now within the space. The unexpected sight struck Dante hard, right in the center of his chest. They looked like a family waiting calmly on the man of the house. Asterisk my family. Asterisk a treacherous, beautiful thought whispered in Dante's guarded mind. Sophia offered a tentative smile. Her face was clean, her hair damp and neatly combed back. Even with the residual bruises, she possessed a quiet, gentle beauty that made Dante's tightly controlled heart ache with yearning. "We should probably get out of your hair," she said softly, her gaze dropping slightly. "You've already done more than enough for us." Nico's face instantly fell at the suggestion of leaving. "Do we have to go, Mama? Can't we stay a little longer? Just tonight?" He looked between her and Dante pleadingly, his eyes wide with undisguised distress, clearly not ready to part ways with his hero, Dante. Dante found himself wanting, desperately, to say yes before Sophia could even begin to answer. But he waited, allowing her the dignity of choice. Sophia bit her lip, debating internally. I don't want to impose," she said, though her eyes clearly betrayed her true wish. She, too, wasn't eager to leave the impenetrable safety of Dante's home so soon. "You're not imposing," Dante said quickly, immediately seizing the opportunity. "Please stay as long as you need. My home is yours." The words left his mouth before he could second-guess them, and he meant every profound syllable. Relief, pure and absolute, mixed with profound gratitude washed visibly over Sophia's features. "Thank you," she said, and there was a brilliant, sincere warmth in her gaze that made Dante's carefully regulated pulse quicken significantly. Nico, overcome with joy, whooped loudly, and to Dante's vast amusement, the boy performed a slightly clumsy little jump of triumph. "I get to stay in the big house." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime of solitude, Dante genuinely laughed, the sound deep, rich and warm. A sound that momentarily succeeded in dispelling all the dark, protective thoughts in his mind. He reached out quickly and ruffled Nico's dark hair affectionately. He caught Sophia watching them. A tender, soft expression settled on her face. Their eyes met, and a potent understanding, a mutual recognition of the significance of this moment, seemed to pass between them. Perhaps they both fully realized how natural, how dangerously comfortable this arrangement was starting to feel, and how truly perilous that was for Dante's long-guarded heart. That evening, Dante's discreet household staff prepared a simple but immensely hearty meal. A comforting, mild soup and fresh crusty bread for Sophia's sake, and plenty of rich pasta for Nico, who had thankfully regained a truly healthy appetite now that his mother was safe. They ate together at Dante's enormous dining table, an experience that was nothing short of surreal for him. He could not remember the last time he'd shared such a personal meal at his table with anyone, let alone a lively, chatty child and a woman who made him feel unpredictable, necessary things he thought had long since died within him. They talked quietly as they ate. Sophia recounted more of what had happened during the disastrous date. How Paolo had initially seemed charming and nice, but grew intensely angry and coercive when she politely turned down a second drink and made it clear she urgently wanted to get home to her son. How he'd managed to coax her into his car by falsely pretending he'd left something important in it to give her, and then pulled a terrifying knife once she was within striking range. Her voice shook with lingering trauma and fear, and Dante had to grip his fork tightly beneath the table to contain his renewed, burning rage at the thought of her peril. But Nico held her hand supportively from beside her, and Dante consciously forced himself to relax for her sake, unwilling to alarm her further. Sophia glossed over the worst, most brutal details of her captivity, merely saying he kept them locked in a room, and she tried desperately to keep the other women's spirits up, all the while praying constantly for a way out. Dante could easily tell she was meticulously sparing Nico the horrible, sordid details. He was both profoundly impressed by her sheer protective strength and deeply heartbroken by her ordeal. She had clearly exerted herself to protect those vulnerable women, even when she was a helpless victim herself. When the serious conversation naturally grew too heavy, Nico inadvertently lightened it by asking Dante sharp, innocent questions about his sprawling house and his collection of cars. "Do you really have a red Ferrari? Angelo said you did," which made Dante smirk slightly and admit yes, it was currently locked away in the garage. Then, with a child's devastating innocence, he asked, "Are you really the boss of everyone, Dante?" Sophia quickly started to chide him softly. "Nico, that's not polite." But Dante waved it off with a small, genuine smile. "It's all right, honestly. Yes, Nico. In this city, I suppose I am the boss of a lot of people." "Like a king," Nico declared proudly, echoing his earlier sentiment. "But you're a good king. You saved Mama." Sophia looked at Dante thoughtfully, her eyes softening. "He is a good man," she agreed quietly, causing Dante to duck his head for a moment, wholly unaccustomed to such open, heartfelt praise. After dinner, Nico's eyelids were already drooping heavily. Exhaustion was finally catching up to the little boy after his long day of fear and excitement. Sophia herself looked like she was fighting a hard battle to stay awake, fatigue and the effects of the painkillers making her blink slowly and heavily. Dante gently suggested they all urgently needed to get some rest. "My home is well guarded. You're completely safe here," he assured them, his voice a low, steady rumble. He guided them back to the quiet guest room where he helped Sophia settle carefully into the enormous bed. Nico stubbornly refused to entertain the idea of going to a different room. He immediately crawled into the bed beside his mother, clinging tightly to her arm as if afraid she might vanish. Dante smiled subtly at the tender, familiar sight. Sophia reached out and touched Dante's hand as he tucked the thick blankets protectively around them both. "Will you stay?" she asked softly, her voice barely a breath. "At least until we fall asleep." It was an impossibly simple, innocent request, spoken with a vulnerability that tore at his resolve. Dante hesitated for only a second. She looked so small and fragile lying there, utterly exhausted. Nico was curled up securely at her side. How could he possibly refuse? "Of course," he said, his voice gentle, devoid of his usual command. He sat heavily in the armchair positioned by the bed, the very same one in which he'd kept solitary vigil the night before over Nico. Sophia kept her hand loosely but firmly around his fingers, as if she needed the physical connection, the tangible weight of his presence, to truly feel safe. Dante was keenly aware of her touch, the surprising softness of her palm, the subtle, unconscious way her thumb lightly caressed his knuckles absent-mindedly. It made his heart ache intensely yet sweetly. In just a few minutes, Nico was deeply asleep, sheer exhaustion trumping even his intense excitement at having his mother back. His little snores were soft and steady, filling the dim room. Sophia fought sleep a bit longer, her luminous eyes fixed on Dante. "Dante," she whispered in the fading light, "I didn't properly thank you." "You've thanked me plenty," he whispered back, his gaze holding hers. "No, not just for saving me." She bit her lip, searching desperately for the precise words. "For caring for my son, for being there when he needed someone so badly. You kept him safe and you gave him hope when I couldn't. I can never possibly repay that debt." Dante shook his head slowly, and on a raw impulse, he brought her hand up to his lips, reverently returning the kiss she had given his hand earlier that morning. Sophia's breath caught sharply as he brushed a warm, tender kiss on her knuckles. "Seeing you two together, like this," he whispered, gesturing to their joined hands, "is all the thanks I'll ever need." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears in the low light. For a moment, Dante thought she might say something else. Something deep, perhaps, that would finally open the doors to the volatile, hovering feelings that were currently unspoken between them. But instead, she simply held his gaze with an expression of profound understanding and whispered, "We won't ever forget what you've done for us." With that quiet declaration, her weariness finally overtook her. Her eyes closed with a flutter, and she drifted peacefully to sleep, her hand still intimately resting in Dante's large one. Dante sat there for a long, quiet while after both mother and child were peacefully asleep. He watched the rhythmic rise and fall of their gentle breaths, his heart full of an overwhelming, complex mix of fierce longing and heavy resignation at the same time. They looked so right together, a perfect, natural unit. And if he were to be completely honest, he looked right there with them, finally at peace. He allowed himself just for tonight to indulge in the fantasy, to imagine what it would be like if this were his real life. Coming home consistently to a loving, warm wife and a cheerful, active son. Sharing simple dinners, easing small nightmares, being genuinely needed and loved openly, without reservation. The precious fantasy was achingly, painfully sweet. In the profound silence, Dante admitted something he had been fiercely denying all day. He had fallen intensely in love with Sophia. Maybe not the kind of slow, measured love that comes after months or years of careful courtship, but a sudden, fierce connection and immediate, deep admiration. And Nico? Dante loved that boy as if he were his own flesh and blood. There was simply no use pretending otherwise to himself now. But love, he knew too well, was the single most dangerous vulnerability in his world. Loving his first wife and child once before had given his enemies fatal power over him, and merciless fate had snatched them brutally away. Could he truly risk that terrifying possibility again? He gazed at Sophia's serene, peaceful face, and Nico's small form curled securely against her. He knew with absolute certainty what he had to do next, as much as the necessary action tore savagely at his soul. Dante rose quietly, his movements practiced and soundless, gently slipping his hand free from Sophia's unconscious grip so as not to wake her. He pressed a light, feather-soft kiss to Nico's dark, mussed hair and then one to Sophia's smooth forehead, letting his lips linger for a necessary second as he meticulously memorized the feel of her warm skin beneath them. "I'll always watch over you," he whispered so faintly that the words drifted immediately away, swallowed by the quiet air without disturbing their deep sleep. Then he left the room, pulling the heavy door closed softly behind him, sealing his past away from his future. Morning light had just begun to softly filter in when Sophia awoke, startled slightly by the cheerful sound of birds chirping outside the large window. She found herself completely alone in the massive bed except for Nico, who was still snuggled securely under her arm, deeply, soundly asleep. Startled, she immediately sat up, her heart already starting to pound, looking around the room frantically. There was no sign of Dante in the armchair. Carefully, so as not to wake the still sleepy Nico, Sophia got up. Her body ached mildly, but the few hours of deep, undisturbed sleep had done wonders for her recovery. She quickly found her own clothes from the day before, now immaculately laundered, pressed, and neatly folded on a nearby dresser. Dante must have instructed someone to clean them overnight. After quickly changing, she stepped out into the quiet, imposing corridor. The entire house was eerily silent. "Dante?" she called softly, hesitantly. Angelo appeared instantly, seemingly out of nowhere, giving her a professional, polite nod. "Good morning, Senora. Dante is..." "Ah." Dante left early. Sophia's heart plummeted and skipped a beat. "Left?" Angelo offered a kind, regretful smile. He had some extremely urgent business out of the city that required his immediate attention, but he asked me specifically to give you something. He handed her a small, sealed envelope. Inside, Sophia found a note written in a strong, neat, decisive handwriting. "Sophia, I am truly sorry I could not say * goodbye in person, but something urgent demanded my immediate attention. **, please know that you and Nico are absolutely safe. **, Angelo will drive you home whenever you are completely ready and ensure you have everything you need to start fresh. **, you both already have my direct number. If you ever need * anything at all, no matter how small, I will be * there instantly, no matter what. Do not hesitate to call. **, it was an honor to know you and your son. Take care of each other. Dante." By the time Sophia finished reading the crisp, professional tone, her vision blurred dangerously with tears. He was gone just like that, a clean surgical removal. She felt an acute, sharp pang of loss, a sudden, devastating hollow where his presence had been. After everything intense and emotional they had been through, he had simply slipped away, leaving behind a polite, meticulously distant note that built a firm wall between them. Angelo seemed to perfectly understand her churning emotions. He spoke gently, his voice low. "The boss. He does that sometimes when things get too personal, too close." Sophia wiped her eyes hastily, taking a shaky, deep breath. Dante was pulling away, she realized, instinctively to protect himself, or perhaps, far more likely, to protect them from the dangers of his life. She vividly recalled the way he'd looked at them last night, the heartbreaking war in his eyes between powerful longing and crippling fear. Angelo added quietly, his eyes fixed on a distant point. "He cares about you and the boy a great deal. That's exactly why he left like this. He thinks staying near will inevitably put you both in further danger." Sophia gave a small, sad nod. She appreciated Angelo's brutal honesty. It only confirmed what she had already suspected. Dante was terrified of what he was starting to feel, afraid that his dark world would eventually, inevitably, crush them. Nico's sleepy voice came suddenly from the doorway of the guest room. "Mama, where's Dante?" He rubbed his eyes sleepily, looking around the empty corridor in confusion. Sophia opened her arms instantly and Nico shuffled heavily to her, still groggy and disoriented. She hugged him tightly, burying her face in his hair. "He had to go, sweetie. He left us a nice note." Her voice wavered despite her best attempt to sound perfectly reassuring. Nico looked profoundly crushed. "He left? But he promised he'd come for dinner and stuff." His eyes instantly welled up with devastating tears. Sophia's heart absolutely broke at her son's raw disappointment. She crouched down immediately to meet Nico's eyes at his level. He didn't want to leave Nico, but his work, his complicated life. It's complicated. He wanted to keep us safe. Nico sniffled loudly, his little hands balling into frustrated fists. "I wanted him to be with us, like a dad." Sophia stroked his hair soothingly. "I know, baby. I know that feeling." She held him for a long moment, simply letting him grieve, but then reminded him gently. "But he did say we can call him any time, and he promised that if we ever need him, he'll definitely be there." Nico pulled back slightly and asked with startling, childlike directness, "Do you think he needs us, Mama?" The unexpected question caught Sophia completely off guard. She instinctively glanced at Angelo, who was suddenly pretending studiously not to listen, but was definitely eavesdropping, judging by the soft, empathetic sigh he let out. She thought about Dante's lonely figure in that big, silent house, the way he had watched them with such profound yearning, and how truly alive and unguarded he had seemed only when he was in their immediate company. Did Dante need them? She felt profoundly in her heart that he did. Perhaps more than he realized or was willing to admit. I think maybe he does, she answered softly, meeting Nico's gaze. But sometimes grown-ups have a really hard time admitting they need someone, especially if they're used to being alone and handling everything themselves. Nico wiped his nose quickly on his sleeve. "Maybe we can help him not be alone one day." Sophia's eyes filled with fresh tears again, but she smiled bravely. "Maybe, yes." She kissed Nico's forehead tenderly. "Right now we should go home. Okay. I'm sure you'd like to see our apartment again. And I desperately need to let everyone know we're completely all right." Reluctantly, Nico nodded his assent. Angelo saw them to Dante's sleek, intimidating black car which had been carefully brought around to drive them home. As he opened the door professionally for Sophia, he handed her one more item. A slender, high-tech cell phone from Dante, he explained gently. "So he's just one call away." Sophia accepted it, her fingers closing tightly around the cool phone, with a bitter mix of overwhelming gratitude and sharp sorrow. She and Nico settled quickly into the car's luxurious interior, and Angelo started the drive toward their modest home. Nico kept twisting around in his seat to gaze backward at the massive villa until it had completely disappeared from view, as if hoping Dante might magically reappear at the last second. But the road behind was utterly empty, except for the rapidly receding grandeur of the vast Costa estate. Sophia held Nico's hand tightly, offering what small comfort she could while her own heart felt newly, terribly hollow. As they neared their familiar neighborhood, Nico suddenly spoke up. "He promised he'll come if we need him." A pause, then, "Do you think we'll ever need him, Mama?" Sophia looked at the boy's earnest, hopeful face and then down at the silent, powerful phone in her lap. "I think we might," she said softly. Then she added with a new, quiet determination that surprised herself. "And not just when we need help, Nico. Maybe one day when he needs us to need him." Nico frowned, trying hard to puzzle out that cryptic adult sentiment. But then he nodded, as if deciding to simply trust his mother's strange intuition. The car pulled up smoothly to their apartment building. Neighbors and friends, having heard the terrifying news and then the miracle of Sophia's safe return, were already beginning to gather with visible relief and joy, ready to welcome them back with a flurry of emotion. Tiara, the well-meaning but misguided friend who had set up the disastrous blind date, was there immediately, in floods of tears, apologizing profusely and hysterically. Sophia gently hugged her, offering immediate, sincere forgiveness. There was absolutely no point in holding on to bitter anger. Paolo alone bore the entirety of that vicious blame. In the ensuing flurry of hugs and questions, Nico stayed extremely close to Sophia's side. Yet, as everyone ushered them inside to fuss over their safety, he looked back one more time toward the black, shining car that had delivered them. It was empty now. Angelo had stepped out courteously to politely hold off the most curious well-wishers. Nico's eyes searched, perhaps still half, expecting Dante to materialize from the car's dark interior. But of course, he wasn't there. Nico reached into his small pocket and gently touched the simple phone Dante had given him. It was a tangible, silent reminder that Dante was still out there, powerfully thinking of them. That night, after the immediate excitement and the endless stream of visitors finally died down and Sophia and Nico were finally alone again in the comforting smallness of their own apartment, Sophia tucked Nico into his own beloved bed. She sat on the edge, stroking his hair gently. "Try to sleep, sweetheart." Nico clutched a small, plush stuffed lion, one that Dante had bought him playfully earlier that day while they were walking in the villa's sun-drenched garden. Dante had jokingly told him it was a fierce guardian to watch over him at night. Nico held it tight now, the symbol of protection close to his heart. "Mama, do you miss him?" Sophia felt tears prick again. She had been rigorously holding them in all day, fighting to be strong, but with her son, honesty felt necessary and right. "Yes, I do." "Me too," Nico whispered sadly. "It hurts." Sophia climbed into the bed without hesitation and hugged Nico close, inhaling his familiar scent. "I know. It hurts me too. But do you remember what Dante told us? We're not alone. We have each other, and he's out there for us if we really need him." Nico nodded against her chest. After a few moments of silence, he asked the question that truly pierced her heart. "Do you think he's okay? Who takes care of him when he's sad?" Sophia's throat tightened painfully. She suddenly remembered Angelo's ominous words. Asterisk, he does that when things get too personal. Asterisk, and Dante's own brief confession about losing his family. He had so much raw, unresolved pain hidden behind that strong, impenetrable exterior. Asterisk, who was truly comforting him tonight in that vast, empty villa? Asterisk, "I'm sure he's okay," she managed to say, though her voice trembled slightly, betraying her deep, sudden worry for the man who had saved them. "He's incredibly strong, yes, but even the strongest people have gaps, weaknesses only others can fill. Everyone needs someone to lean on, even if they won't ever admit it out loud." Nico pulled his head back from her shoulder, his small face set in a fiercely earnest, almost adult determination. "If he ever truly comes back to stay, I'm going to start calling him Dad for real. Because he is. He basically showed up and protected us exactly the way a father should, with no question, no hesitation." A wave of emotion finally broke the dam Sophia had held up all day. Tears, hot and heavy, finally spilled from her eyes and traced paths down her cheeks. She pressed a tender kiss to Nico's forehead, right where his unruly hair began. "I think he would absolutely love that, Toro," she whispered, the nickname tasting like a bittersweet comfort. "But remember this, even if his life means he can't be here physically, we know with certainty that he deeply cares for us. Don't we?" "That's right," Nico murmured, already succumbing to exhaustion, his body finally relaxing into the mattress. "He's our guardian, like a knight guarding a tower, like my lion." He lifted the plush lion toward his face and managed the barest hint of a small, sleepy smile. Sophia remained beside him, cradling his hand, until the heavy weight of the day's events and accumulated stress finally pulled him deep into sleep. Only then did she gently rise and step out onto the tiny iron balcony of their small apartment. This was the same secluded space where, perhaps, Dante's unseen, vigilant protection had previously deflected unnoticed threats. The Italian night air was crisp and cool against her skin, and the usual frenetic chaos of the distant city had mellowed into a hushed hum. She gazed up at the first stars beginning their timeless, shimmering dance in the velvet dark. With no one left to be strong for, she finally allowed herself the grace of crying without reservation. Tears of overwhelming relief that the danger had passed, searing tears of heartbreak over the impossibly difficult farewell, and sparkling tears of fierce, undeniable hope for the future. She did not know if fate, that capricious thing, would ever fully weave Dante back into the permanent tapestry of their lives. But she knew one absolute truth. A potent, unspoken bond had been forged in the fire of crisis, and it was one that would not easily, or ever, be broken. Dante was somewhere out there, and he remembered them, and he cared. In the palm of her hand, she tightly gripped the new, sophisticated phone he had given her. A silent, glowing promise, a lifeline tossed across the abyss. After what felt like an eternity under the vast sky, Sophia drew a deep, cleansing breath of the cool air and resolutely wiped her eyes dry. She made a quiet, profound vow beneath that magnificent Italian expanse. She would not only diligently rebuild her life for Nico's stability and happiness, but she would also not retreat if destiny, in its generosity, offered her another genuine chance with the complicated, damaged man who had saved everything they cherished. Perhaps, one day, Dante would finally conquer the demons of his fear and allow himself to claim a permanent, tangible place within their fragile family unit. Perhaps one day he would understand that in saving them, he had, in a crucial, deep way, saved a lost part of himself too. Until that inevitable day, they would live fully, and he would remain a luminous promise on the distant horizon. A promise eternally sealed by the simple, powerful words he had chosen to leave them. "If you ever need me, I will be there." And Sophia, resting her faith on that unwavering anchor, believed him with the entirety of her heart. In a complicated world overflowing with doubt and uncertainty, Dante's sacred promise felt as solid and eternal as the ancient stars above, a quiet, steadfast beacon that fueled her rediscovered strength. Far across the bustling, sleeping town, Dante sat deeply recessed in the back seat of his sleek black car, his professional driver silently navigating the quiet, upscale streets. He, too, felt an irresistible pull to look up at the gathering emergence of the stars overhead. He allowed himself to wonder wistfully if Sophia and Nico were looking at those same pinpricks of light at that very moment. His chest ached with a familiar, profound longing, but underneath it, there rested an unexpected, strange layer of peace. They were secure. They were safe. That was the singular thing that truly mattered. He reached carefully into the interior pocket of his jacket and withdrew a small, worn photograph, the one he had gently retrieved from Nico's hand on that chaotic first night. It showed Sophia and Nico, caught forever smiling together in a moment of untroubled, sunlit happiness. Dante ran a rough thumb across the image of Sophia's radiant face, then moved it over Nico's typically goofy, endearing grin. Someday, he mused privately, his eyes tracing the outlines of their joy. Someday perhaps I can finally earn a rightful place in that picture beside them. For now, he slipped the treasured photo back into his pocket, settling it intimately close to his heart, and stared out into the dark, passing night. He allowed a subtle, deeply hopeful smile to curve the edge of his mouth just as his powerful car smoothly merged into the shadow-draped city highway, knowing instinctively that this moment was absolutely not an end, but merely a necessary, open-ended pause in a significant story that had just truly begun.
My flat sings wipers to the sky. Melodies flows gentle and free, carrying dreams across the sea. In every note, a piece of me, forever here in harmony. My flat sings wipers to the sky. Melodies flows gentle and free, carrying dreams across the sea. In every note, a piece of me, forever here in harmony. Music lives inside my heart. Music lives inside my heart.